Okay.
Okay, we're golden.
Wait just a minute or two until we see everybody return. Our planning commissioner or a staff person that we need to know is here. If you would show your picture, we'll know when to get started. Sarah, are you here?
Here.
Yes, I think it's it.
Welcome to the October 1st, 2020 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. In response to the state of emergency in Georgia regarding COVID-19 or the coronavirus, this meeting is being held via a WebEx online meeting platform broadcast on YouTube. The public were provided the opportunity to email comments to the planning department prior to noon yesterday. Members of the public also address the Planning Commission in real time through electronic communication provided in the auditorium at 120 West Doherty Street, subject to safe distancing measures. For those of you who are viewing, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at www.accgov.com/planning. For those of you viewing the meeting on the table by the auditorium door, you will find copies of tonight's agenda and a political campaign contribution disclosure form wishing to speak to an agenda item before the mayor and commission. After staff presentation of an agenda item, we will receive public comment, first from the applicant and then from those in the auditorium. 10 minutes are allowed to address the commission for the applicant or their representative, and also for any specified interest group representative who has requested additional time prior to the meeting. 3 minutes are allowed for anyone who wishes to address the commission. After public comment, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. Public closed, the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss and act on the item. We will receive no public comments at that time unless requested by the commission. When addressing the commission from the auditorium, please speak from the designated place as directed by the staff. For all speakers, please provide us with your name, your address, and your occupation for the record. For the auditorium, a timer device will display an amber light 30 seconds before the expiration of the allotted time and a red light upon expiration of the allotted time. So please pay attention to that to interrupt you. For those addressing the commission remotely, you will also be expected to adhere to the specified time limits. May be displayed by the applicants remotely or in the auditorium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the time limits previously stated. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicants. And for those of you in the auditorium, please refrain from applauding or jeering any of the speakers. For everyone interested in tonight's meeting, please turn off or silence your cell phones. For commission members, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. The chat box, if you have any technical issues, raise your hand to your camera if you'd like to speak, and please wait to be recognized. This meeting is being recorded. And so we're going to move directly into our meeting. Do I hear a motion to introduce staff reports and all other documents into the official record?
So move.
Here, a second.
Second.
Jeff? Okay, Lucy, and then Jeff. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, remember, if you don't raise your hand, I'm counting that as a abstention. Okay, I think we had one person that didn't vote. All right, moving on to the minutes. Do you have changes or recommendations related to our September 3rd Planning Commission meeting?
Maxine, can I get clarification of who was the abstainer?
Jim. Jim didn't. Jim, did you mean to vote on the approval of the?
I
staff
attempted
record?
to, but the video.
Yeah, Jim's video's going in and out. It's kind of what mine was doing. So that's a yes, Rick. So
Okay.
that was unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
To the minutes, do we have any changes, recommendations, modifications to the minutes of the September 3rd meeting? If
I
not,
do
do
want
I
to
have a
mention-
motion?
I do want to mention Jim had one correction that's been made.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
I move approval.
Minutes.
I move approval.
Lucy, do I have a second? Yes, Lucy, do I have a second? Jeff, thank you. I'll please raise your hand.
Yes. It's still not responding. Yes.
You may speak. That's good. All right. Brad, do we have a May courts? Anything to review about May courts?
We do not have a report. No, ma'am.
Any public comment related to May courts? Okay, then we're going to move to our first item. It's under old business. Master Plan Development, case number PD-2020-04-1125. It is at 498 Little Oak Street. It is here requesting approval. And the purpose of this request is to divide a parcel currently zoned as RS5A, Single Family Residential Airport Overlay, into two parcels, both zoned RS5A PD. Planned development in order to construct two new single-family residences on what is currently undeveloped land. Rick?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, here's the location map, and I realize you guys have seen this a couple of times. We're at the corner of Little Oak Street and Dublin Street, as well as some frontage on Old Winterville Road. The aerial photograph showing the undeveloped property. The future land use map, traditional neighborhood would remain the same. The zoning would become the zoning of RS5 would remain the same, but this would be a planned development in order to divide the property with less than 1 acre lots. So the planned development, as Maxine mentioned, is to allow a lot to be subdivided within the airport overlay zone into lots less than 1 acre in order to construct two single family residences. It is compatible with underlying zoning categories of single family residential, and there's no change to future land use category of traditional neighborhood. Same pictures you fellas, everyone has seen a couple times before. We have the Firefly Trail nearby, on the old railroad tracks. And the applicant has provided, with the master site plan, 2 plans for the houses, the 2 houses that are proposed. One facing Little Oak Street and one facing Dublin. These are a comparison of the preliminary elevations that you saw earlier and then the master plan elevations, the latest elevations. And again, for the other house. Because it's in the airport overlay and the request is to go less than an acre, this did go through the airport authority and they have recommended approval for this project. It will need to meet the usual conditions, non-metallic roofing, shielded lighting, no chimneys. There's some standards like that would still apply as to all property development. Staff is recommending approval with a couple of conditions. The Public Works Department has mentioned that the impervious coverage with the changed plans have now gone above 5,000 square feet, and that's combined the 2 lots together. Therefore, a new rule kicks in for stormwater management to be handled on site. If the applicant can choose to reduce that below 5,000 square foot of impervious surface, then that stormwater management standard would not apply. The second condition is to record the final plat, again to divide the lots, and to dedicate required right-of-way for sidewalk. That sidewalk is voluntary. It's not required for info lots. So the applicant has voluntarily agreed to provide the sidewalk as per the binding plan, and we just ask that it be all inside the public right-of-way for maintenance. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, we will now hear from our applicant. Mr. Halls?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Welcome back.
Been a while. Ben Halls, Houston, Georgia, owner of the company. I made a few changes. One was to correct the site plan. We had a few, well, both of the houses were not fitted on the lot correctly. So we made the corrections to that. And I changed actually one plan that I was going to build to accommodate the look and the style of the existing houses in the neighborhood. So that was pretty much the only changes that was asked of me and what I had to complete. Other than that, we seem to be all good at this point.
Thank you very much. Do we have any people in the auditorium? Yes, I see that we have some. Do we have anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application?
No, we do not.
All right. Do we have anyone who would like to? I'm sorry. Was someone speaking to me? Okay. Do we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the item?
No, we do not.
All right. Then, Mr. Halls, if everyone could mute except those that are speaking, we're getting just a little bit of feedback. Mr. Halls, I guess you don't need a 2-minute rebuttal, do you, since no one has spoken? Is that correct?
No.
All right. Then we'll come behind the bar and have discussion amongst commissioners. Any comments or thoughts?
Kristen?
I'm sorry, I can't even see Kristen. There she is. Kristen.
Hey, hi. I have a comment and a question. Mr. Hawes, I appreciate the work that you've done on the plan. I really like the houses you've proposed. I think they look really great. So I appreciate that and thank you. One question I had, so if he's voluntarily putting in a sidewalk and I guess the impervious surface is now over 5,000 square feet, is the voluntary sidewalk counting against him essentially? Or is that not count?
No, it's my understanding that's not counting. Is that would be in the right of way? who would not be on the project itself.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Jeff?
I guess I'd like to propose a motion when it's appropriate. If the chair is ready to entertain one.
I think so.
I'd
I
like-
see people with a lot of questions, so.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval with the conditions as outlined by staff in the staff report.
All right, do I have a second?
A second.
Matt, that's great. All right, do we have any other comments related to the motion? I would like to say to Mr. Hawes, I'm very appreciative of your willingness to put the sidewalk in. I think that's very helpful to the neighborhood, and we appreciate you voluntarily doing that. Any other comments? All right, we're ready to vote. Rick, a roll call, please.
Okay. Scarborough,
That's a yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Anderson,
Jim?
you're muted.
He was having trouble with his internet, I think.
Here he comes.
Jim, are you here?
I'm here, but you can't hear or see me.
Yeah, well, we can hear you. We are voting, and we are voting on the 498 Little Oak Street. Your vote was to accept the application. And what is your vote? Yes or no?
Oh, he's muted.
Oh. All right. I guess then we will move on, and if he gets in while we're still voting, then we will take his vote at that time. All right, next person, Rick.
Beresford,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Rowland,
Yes.
and Jim, can you unmute?
Press the space bar, Jim.
What, Alice? All right.
Recommending press the space bar.
Yeah.
Just-
Okay, I think we will move on perhaps, since Jim is present and we just can't get his vote, then Brad, would it be possible to accept that vote before the meeting is over?
I think so, yes.
All right, then let's do that. It doesn't seem quite fair to not allow him to vote. He's here, he just can't get in. So, Rick, would you give us the results that you have?
Oh, it's unanimous of those
All right.
voting.
Yes, if Jim gets in, it'll still be unanimous because I think I heard him say yes, but I'm not sure, so I can't go on that. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Halls. Appreciate you meeting with us these several times. Looking
Thank you.
forward to seeing what you do there. All right, let's move on to our second application under old business. That is a master plan development, case number PD-2020-09-2592, which is at 398 South Millage Avenue. Rick, excuse me. The purpose of this request is to seek approval of a planned development for a sorority addition within the commercial office Millage Avenue corridor zoning district. Rick?
Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, here's the location map, South Millage across from Henderson Avenue. You can see the sorority lot outlined in red dots. Here's the aerial view. Again, we have an existing sorority building that has an addition proposed in the rear. So it's existing 0.73 acre property containing a sorority use, and they're proposing addition about 5,000 square feet. It has gone through the Historic Preservation Commission, and that has been approved for architectural compatibility. And it's still in the local area, nearby houses, the second smallest among those Greek houses. 7 waivers are being requested, and this is one reason why it's gone from a special use to a planned development. The special uses are basically supposed to meet the ordinance with some exception. Planned developments are meant for the flexibility. In this case, a lot of waivers were needed because existing property conditions, the current parking lot's not meeting a lot of these ordinance standards. So we have a number of waivers related to the parking in the rear of the building. I'll get to that more in a second, but everything except for one relates to parking and the conserved tree canopy as well. There's a waiver to that. Oh, sorry, there's no change to the residential future land use. As with all planned developments, we have a bonding application for plans and elevations. Future land use isn't changing. The mixed density residential will remain. And we're just adding the planned development onto the zoning map. The site plan, which you've seen before, maybe with some changes, basically the same as we saw with the special use request. And just in relationship to other Greek houses, this has the addition shown with the current building, still one of the smaller Greek houses in the area. The floor plans were provided, so we could check for the parking numbers for one reason. And the architectural elevations, again, these have been approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. Some photographs of the site. And we saw this before, just trying to, again, relay some of these parking variances, waivers. The number of parking spaces, that has to do with just the sheer number they could get onto the site. They have, as mentioned in the report, been able to acquire some off-site parking from the Clarke County School District. The percentage of parking dedicated to residents is a waiver. Percentage of compact spaces is a bit over the percentage allowed. The two-way driveway width, again, just too narrow, as well as the parking stall depth, drive aisle width, parking lot screening depth. So these basically are trying to get as many spaces as they can on the site. So staff is recommending approval of this plan development request with a couple of conditions: that the offsite parking agreement, need more information on that, such as the availability times, and that it be recorded in accordance with the ordinance. So it actually is recorded at the courthouse. That the tree management plan be revised. We're trying to see if we can get 2 large canopy trees in the front yard. We've added subject to approval by the arborist. We don't want to try to squeeze those trees where they're not healthy. So it may just be we have 1 large tree, but we're going to see if we can get 2 large canopy trees in the front yard. So that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from the applicant. Who is representing the applicant?
I believe Lori Bork is here to represent the applicant. And Lori, you should be unmuted
I
now.
see her.
Can you all hear me?
Lori?
There she is.
Okay, great, thank you. Lori Bork, newcomer, 150 Pulaski Heights, and I'm principal at Architectural Collaborative and agent for Delta Pi Epsilon sorority. And thank you all again for your time tonight. I will be sharing my time with Josh Coons of Coons Environmental Design, who's the landscape architect on the project as well. I know everyone's familiar with this project from our presentation at the August meeting, so I don't want to reiterate all of that information, but I'll just touch on some of the key points and updates. Actually, Rick, do you have our slideshow available that we gave?
Okay.
Rick, you do such a good job with sharing content.
Is that coming through okay?
Dude,
Yes.
Sort of. It's a little wacky. The graphics aren't the same as what we said, but that's okay. It's just the cover page. Do you mind flipping to the next slide? There we go. That looks a little better. So the purpose of the project is to address the sorority's goals of housing more girls and providing meal service. There are currently only 16 student residents and a house director in the home, whereas many of the other sorority houses on the street have over 50 or 60 residents. The proposed design adds 12 more resident beds and a guest room to bring the total bed count to 30. The other priority is to be able to provide breakfast and lunch for the residents and dinner for the members of the chapter Monday through Thursday evenings. This requires a commercial kitchen and a 90-occupant dining room. We reduced the size of the dining room by 3.5 feet in the zone clouded in the plan that you can see here, as we had proposed in the last meeting. And that reduced the occupancy a little bit of the dining room and provided some additional area for the parking lot in the rear. As you can see on the plans, the ground floor addition is primarily the dining room and the commercial kitchen and its related functions, as well as the code required fire stair on the north side of the plan. The second level has the one-story hyphen, which is a roof terrace above that one-story portion, and then the second-story bedrooms and shared bathroom, and again, the related fire stair. We realized that the site constraints on this property are prohibitive to include a large meeting room in this house, so the sorority will continue to hold their weekly chapter meetings on the UGA campus, as they've been doing for many years. Can you flip to the next slide, please? In terms of zoning and use, as Rick mentioned previously, the property is already a sorority use, and the proposed design meets all zoning requirements, including building height, building setbacks, lot coverage, and floor area ratio. As an overlay district, Millage Avenue has reduced the standard 0.75 FAR for commercial zoning down to just 0.5, and even with this reduction, the proposed project is 22% less than allowed zoning limit. The only ordinances requiring waivers are parking related and tree canopy related, as the planning staff outlined, and Josh Coons and I will address further. Next slide, please. The HPC has already approved the project for its appropriateness of mass, scale, and architectural character. The addition is sited in the rear of the home and will be largely out of sight from Millage Avenue. And the impact on the front elevation is only restoration improvements, including restoring the copper cupola, the historic double column configuration on the front porch, which you can see in the upper proposed drawing, and the historic photograph on the upper left. And replacing the plexiglass in the turret windows with real glass. There's actually plexiglass in a number of those windows now, we noticed, and we'll definitely be addressing that and replacing it. Next slide, please. In our previous presentation to the Planning Commission audit, I talked about the use of the one-story hyphen to help break up the massing of the house and allow the addition to read more distinctly from the historic house per preservation guidelines. The clouded area here in the drawing highlights the changes with the 3.5-foot width reduction in the hyphen to lower the dining room occupancy and provide that additional parking area in the rear. Next slide, please. There's really no changes to the rear elevation from the last meeting. If you can flip again, please. And again, the only change to the south elevation from the last meeting is that 3.5-foot width reduction to the hyphen. Next slide, please. As stated in the staff report, 91 parking spaces are required by ordinance. We are providing 30 spaces on site to cover all the residents of the home, plus 1 guest space. In addition, there'll be 40 spaces leased from Clarke Central High School to cover the increased parking demand at dinner time on Monday through Thursday evenings. This amounts to 1 parking space per 1.3 occupants dining room, which we think is more than sufficient. We're requesting a waiver to change the percentage of on-site spaces for full-time residents from 80% to 100% to avoid unnecessary traffic congestion. With all spaces being permitted, it'll eliminate the possibility of girls trying to enter the lot, having to turn around because they can't find a space, and then having to re-enter Millage Avenue. We just think that would be a cluster, and we're much better off having designated parking. So instead, non-resident members will know where they're supposed to park, and they can go directly to those spaces at the high school, which is located immediately behind this property. In addition, the UGA bus stop is right across the street from the house, and new bicycle racks are being provided on site. The sorority's transportation policy encourages the use of these alternative means of transportation. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Josh Coons and continue the discussion on parking and site-related topics.
Great. Thank you, Lori. Again, I'm Josh Coons with Coons Environmental Design, 205 Clover Street, and we have been helping Lori with this project. And picking up on where Lori left off, I would like to point out the slide that we have on the screen. The addition was designed to ensure adequate planning space between the proposed structure and the neighbor to the south. The one residential neighbor in this area happens to be right next door, and we're sensitive to that. There is a wall that was constructed by the neighbor, and you can see it in this elevation. It's actually about 8 feet high and extends the length of the property to the rear. It actually helps conceal a significant portion of the addition. And the project will plant tall evergreens to help filter the rest of the building above that wall. Additionally, that upper patio area that Lori noted on the single story hyphen breaks up the massing and actually will contain planted elements to soften the roof line of the second story. Next slide, please, Rick. From the west, you can see the proposed massing of the structure and its relationship to the residential neighbor. And the landscape opportunities that we have on Delta Phi's side of that wall to soften the addition. Next slide, Rick. As we back out to the full site, you can see the addition requires a reconfiguration of the parking area. The lot count increased from 26 existing to 30 to accommodate the number of total beds. This ultimately results in the requested waivers for the project, which are mostly limited to variations on standard parking dimensions. The parking area is located to provide as much room on the south side as is possible and sort of air, so to speak, on the north side of the lot where a large parking area already exists. Next slide, Rick. To that end, we are presenting reduced parking dimensions in the waiver requests. In recent projects, we have shown the Planning Commission existing examples of similar dimensions in semi-public parking lots. This one you've seen before. This is a UGA parking lot at Legion Pool, which has been in place for many years, similar dimensions, and accommodates a much larger parking count, actually. Next slide, Rick. More recently, we proposed similar modifications to the parking standards when we presented Alpha Phi across the street for approval. This project has since been constructed, the lot's been installed, and has been in use by the sorority. Similar to Delta Phi, it has one space per bed on site with off-site parking for guests and other chapter members. So pretty close resemblance. Next slide, Rick. These dimensions we are comfortable proposing based not only on observations of existing lots in use, but also we do a lot of field testing just to make sure this kind of works out. Next slide. What's really interesting is a lot of these reduced dimensions can actually be found in our daily driving. This slide shows my daily commute down Pulaski Street, where two cars often have to pass each other going slowly, even when there is a car parallel parked on one side of the road. So we know that these dimensions can work. Next slide, please, Rick. Looking back at the site and putting the parking improvements into context, we are removing a number of the existing trees along the northern side of the property, and this does result in the conserved tree canopy waiver request. We will have sufficient space, though, to plant new trees within the remaining landscape area to meet or exceed the minimum total tree canopy requirement for the site. Happy to work with the arborist to get additional large canopy trees in there, not a problem at all. Although we are expanding the structure and increasing the main drive width and expanding the parking count, we are able to stay under the total lot coverage allowed in this zone, even as small as this lot is. Additionally, through the voluntary use of porous pavement within the parking stalls, we're able to offset the coverage increase by decreasing the total impervious area on the site.
1 minute, Josh.
Thank you, sir. In closing, we believe this is a sensitive addition to the historic house and a compatible development within the Millage Avenue corridor. We believe we have been able to improve upon the previous submission that you saw through the addition of the off-site parking agreement with Clarke Central. I will say it pays to know who to call in this situation, so we appreciate that assistance. But in that context, we look forward to your comments and recommendations for this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. All right, we will now, do we have, yes, we have people in the auditorium. Do we have those who would like to speak in favor of this application?
We do not.
Okay, do we have those who would like to speak in opposition to the application?
No, we do not.
All right, then Josh and Lori, I have to assume you don't need your 2-minute rebuttal time if no one has spoken. Am I correct, or do you need it?
I don't think so.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, then we'll come behind the bar. Do we have questions or comments from commissioners? Jeff.
Well, I'll start out by saying I appreciate all the work that was put into this. I think it is it's a thoughtful plan. Ordinarily, tree canopy questions and parking questions give me heartburn, and the parking lot at Legion Field has certainly cost me a couple of $100 in body shop fees. But I think, and I'm thinking back to the 5 and 10 development when we had a one-way driveway there, and all we went through for that. But I think that's offset by the fact that these parking places are reserved for residents. So after the first or the second time they've been in there, they'll learn their way around, and they'll certainly know which car it is they clobbered in the parking lot. If that should happen, and I'm sure it won't because everybody's a great driver. But and the tree canopy plan, I like the way that you have used the trees to screen it. I hope to see. I want to see as much green. I love trees. I want to see you see them behind me here. I like to preserve it when we can. So, but in sum, I think this is a thoughtful plan. And I appreciate the way y'all have gone about it, and I appreciate the changes that you made to make it a little bit better. It's amazing what you can do with 3.5 feet. I'm impressed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have others who wish to comment? Katie.
I also like this plan, the massing, the restoration of the historic elements. The only issue I have is the tree removal. I took a look at the mature trees today, and they're really beautiful. And I would personally prefer less parking and keeping the trees. I don't know if that's possible with the dimensions of the addition, but if it's possible to reduce the parking and access widths, I think it'd be well worth it to keep the trees.
Would Katie, would you like a response from the applicant on that?
Yes, please.
Josh, I guess that's in your neighborhood.
I believe it is, and I think there's a couple of considerations there. One is a precedent that we set with Alpha Phi, and I say we in conjunction with the planning department, of trying to provide a minimum of 1 parking space for each bed in the house. We started that project with less than 1 space per bed, and it was requested, or required, I should say, that we meet that minimum. So I think there's a portion of that answer that maybe Brad could speak to. We're always willing to do our best to save the trees when we can. That parking count ultimately is what's driving that. Even if we lost a couple spaces, I don't know that we're going to be doing much to save those trees, just in the sense that they're currently in between 2 existing parking lots. And the pecan, I admit, is painful to think about losing. But there's a difference between what the county counts as a conserved tree and a tree that we're able to what I call salvage, which means we can work to keep it on site. We don't necessarily have to take it down. We just can't necessarily count it towards conserved canopy coverage. And that's what we're going to strive to do in the spaces between the proposed lot and the existing lot, is not necessarily take them down, but we'll keep them and monitor their health. We just can't count them as conserved canopy because they don't meet some of the rootable area requirements and just drip line requirements. So that's been the discussion in-house. I think I would turn that over to Brad to just speak to the minimum parking count, if that's okay.
Brad?
I mean, Josh is right. From a staff standpoint, you know, because of the way the parking calculations for Greek houses are dealt with, I mean, from a staff position, we've always kind of taken a hard line with it, that at a minimum, if you're going to ask for waivers to your parking, you need to at least have a parking space for everybody that lives there. So you don't have permanent residents that are having to park off-site, park it on the street, other things like that. But, you know, that is just something that we've tried to be consistent with from a staff recommendation on this one and previous ones as well.
One component, if I'm not speaking, but I am speaking. One component of that is there is no ability to have street parking there. Is that correct, Josh?
I think street parking would be a challenge relative to the required dimensions for parallel spaces in that situation. Yes, ma'am.
Katie?
This seems like a great location not to have a lot of parking. I mean, there are UGA students, the UGA bus is there, which is the main place they're going. There's Uber, there's biking, there's walking. And Millage Avenue already has a lot of traffic congestion. Every additional parking space is just going to add to that.
Yeah. I would jump in if I could and say I totally agree with you. And how few cars we could accommodate even in the offsite has been one of those consistent conversations. I think from our standpoint, you know, we kind of need to figure out how many waivers we can realistically ask for. And quite honestly, coming into this, we didn't think we could ask for a reduction in the 1 car per bed scenario. So.
And Josh, if it's okay, if I can share the response.
Please do.
Here.
Yeah.
Just to chime in, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at the original survey for the property. I just pulled it up too, and I believe that the majority of those trees that needed to come out are actually along that north property line where our drive aisle has to go. It's really the only place where we can enter the property. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not really a matter of giving up parking spaces because that's the access into the property.
Yeah.
Where those trees are currently located.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you, Lori. There's a number of trees along that edge. And just as background information, one of the things that we've looked at, even with offsite parking, was what we could do with that property next door to sort of provide additional means of access. And there's just no opportunity there given the potential sale of that property and a hesitance to enter into any sort of long-term agreement with us. So there has been a lot of conversation about that, to be honest with you, but we're kind of where we're at this point.
Matt?
Yeah, I share Katie's preference for, if it were possible, saving a couple of those trees, even if it meant providing parking for 90% of the residents of the house rather than 100% of the residents of the house, if it were feasible. And one thing that I just would ask the applicant if you could clarify is there any document in our packet? I looked and I couldn't figure out which trees are going away or are likely to go away. Is that indicated on any of these plans? And can you refer us to the page?
It is. It would be on the tree management plan. And all the trees that have to be removed should be marked with an X.
Okay.
Yeah.
If no one else has a question, okay, Jim, I have a question before we get off this subject. So that's all I want to say. Jim?
Yes, I'm a little bit concerned about going below the 100% parking space per unit, because other people may make proposals in the future that will be less responsibly constructed than this one, and we're setting a precedent that can cause a slippery slope to undesirable development.
Okay, Sarah, didn't you have your hand up?
I did. I wanted to ask about two things. One of them is both really for staff. Rick, when you were presenting the proposal, you mentioned that staff is recommending adding 1 or 2 large canopy trees, but in your recommendation in the staff report, you say 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, we put 2 as a condition, but we put subject to ACC arborists because until we get out there and make sure we can get 2 with enough area, as Josh has mentioned, trees do have to have a certain growing area. And we'd have to see where utility lines are and everything else, but we'd like to try to get 2. If it may only be we can get 1. So,
okay, and so the way it's worded kind of allows for that.
yeah, we tried to get the flexibility in there. We're going to shoot for 2, at the most, but it could drop down to 1.
Okay, great. And then the other question I had was for Brad, and I know I've asked this before, and I just want to make sure I understand. The agreement with the school district is part of the binding site plan. What happens if that agreement falls apart? What does the applicant do? But is it just that they, in order to stay compliant, they have to replace that with a different agreement with the new party?
It would become a code enforcement issue at that point. On one like this, we're going to reach out to the sorority house. We're going to let them know that we've been notified that the lease with the school, the agreement has been discontinued. And then obviously we would have to give them a certain period of time in which to, try to obtain additional. I mean, at that point, if they are unable to, if that's kind of your worst case scenario, then we've got to make a decision as to whether or not we pursue further action in the courts and start citing them and taking them to court, or, that's just kind of the worst case scenario that none of us want to deal with. But ultimately, if we get to that situation, I can't just magically make it go away either. So.
Okay. And then just a general comment. I think this looks really great. I really appreciate how the applicants have really bent over backwards to figure out how to make this work and thought about what we said in our previous response. So I appreciate it, and I think it will look great. I don't think there's a right answer.
Any other
The
comments?
parking issue is, I understand sort of all the issues that, I understand that part of the neighborhood, and I do understand how much, as much as we want these students to move toward a less car dependent lifestyle, I do know that those neighbors for years have been battling these students parking all over the place. And so I think that this is probably the best compromise for that. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any other comments? Katie?
I was just wondering if clarified just that it's the access that's taking out the trees. So is there any other way of doing that?
I'm sorry, was that directed to me?
Yes. Is there any other way of doing the access to keep the trees? No.
I'm looking.
Check your mute. Excuse me, but everybody check your mute, please. We have a lot of mics open. Thank you. Lori, go ahead.
Sure. I'm just looking on my screen right now and comparing. There's definitely, unfortunately, the survey I'm looking at is kind of blurry. It's in our report that's at a smaller letter size scale, and I don't have access to our server right now with the larger print, but 1, 2, 3, 4, the majority of the existing trees are definitely along the drive aisle because they're right along that north property line. And if you look at the site plan, that north property line, it's our only way to access into those parking lots because of the location of the house where it is now and the most logical place to put the addition. So unfortunately, I think that is the case. And I know that that Josh and his team worked hard to keep, you know, every tree that we could. That was definitely our goal. We could take a closer look. Josh, those two compact spaces, I don't know, that are closest to the north property. It's not clear to me whether there's an existing tree close to that, but it looks like they're mostly on that drive aisle.
Yeah.
And to be honest, too, I'm not I won't claim to be an arborist, but I do have a husband who has a PhD in forestry, and just sort of anecdote, I had a big tree in my backyard when we were building our house. It was a water oak, and I did not want to cut it down. I was adamant that it was going to stay, and we could work our house around it. And my husband's like, we've got to get rid of this tree, and we can plant a new one. It's okay. And water oaks are not great trees. And sometimes it does come down to the species. You know, having pecan trees around parking lots honestly isn't great. Water oaks are great. We could plant a nicer tree, I think, in the front yard that'll be there for many years to come. And you know, while I lament that larger canopy loss too, I think we can make up for it in a positive way.
Jeff?
I wanted to go ahead and put myself on the record as being someone else who would love to find a way to stick another tree in here, but from a practical point of view, you obviously can't put them opposite the parking places. You can't put them in the 12-foot wide section of driveway. The only piece left is a 20-foot wide. And even if you took 8 feet out of that, I don't think that would be sufficient for any sort of root zone, any sort of drip line without encroaching on the neighbors too much with your roots. So I understand the applicant's difficulty with this. Yeah, I'd love to get rid of all the parking places and everybody walk or ride a bicycle or the bus. But I understand that I still live in Athens in the 21st century and we're not quite there yet. So I feel like we'll get there one day, but yes, I don't disagree that I would love to save every tree we can, and certainly every useful tree, every long-lived species, and everything that's going to shade the asphalt, frankly. But I like to think that having seen projects in the past like this, that the best that can be done will be done.
Alice?
Thank you. I just want to add, I definitely want to, let's please put a pin in Katie's objection here, because we've heard this so many times on the Planning Commission, whether it's trees being sacrificed for parking or whatever. I appreciate what the applicant is saying, that they are trying to kind of stay in line with what we've already done across the street in terms of parking, and I appreciate what planning staff is doing, holding to the one space per resident because of the pressure from the neighborhoods. But I hope that we can continue as we move forward to work toward fewer parking requirements in properties like this that are so close to town and also right on the bus line.
Thank you, Ms. Kinman. I would like to just make sure from Josh and Lori that I am interpreting what they're saying correctly. On the one hand, I thought we were talking possibly about eliminating parking spaces in order to allow us to keep the trees. Then I really heard Lori and maybe Josh too saying that in fact trees were trees that were in the 12, basically along the 12-foot driveway. And so by eliminating those trees, by keeping those, you can't keep them. Bottom line, you can't keep them. And so that really doesn't do anything for your parking issues. So just to clarify, are we saying that it could be done or it really can't be done?
I'll jump in there, Madam Chair, because I'd like to make a point and make sure we're being clear with everybody. There are 13 trees along the northern property line. 8 of those are in the driveway themselves. And the other 5 don't qualify, one of which is in a proposed parking space. But the other 4 don't qualify ultimately because they don't meet the drip line requirements. And so just to be clear, and Matt, coming back to your question, we typically show those on the tree management plan, and I apologize, I'm looking at what we have now, and we only showed the proposed trees. The trees that are saved are accurately represented in the table, though, to give you an idea. But along that north property line, there are 8 of the 13 that are in the drive, one of which is in a space, and then the other 4. One wouldn't be able to be kept through the retaining wall, but the other 2, the pecan that I mentioned, is one that we've been looking at as possibly trying to save or salvage. We can't claim it as conserved because we can't meet the offset requirements. So I hope that helps. And I don't want to confuse things, Madam Chair, but I do just want to sort of reiterate that we did look at sort of access alternatives, coming back to Ms. Goodrum's. And it just wasn't possible because the only way to really deal with that is to work with the neighbor to the north, and they weren't open to anything like that. We certainly did try.
All right. Do we have any other further comments or thoughts? If not, I will entertain a motion. Jeff?
I would like to make a motion to recommend approval with conditions and shed a tear for the trees.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or further questions, clarifications needed before we vote? All right, then I'll call for the vote. Rick, if you could do a roll call, please.
Scarborough,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Wilson. You're muted.
Whose name did you call, Rick?
Anderson,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
and Rowland.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh and Lori. We appreciate you being present.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much, all.
Madam Chair, while we're at this point, could I go ahead and ask for Jim's vote on the first item?
Absolutely. Since we have Jim is live here.
We never actually recorded a vote for item number 1. The motion was to approve with conditions.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. We're all having to work with technology and doing it how we can do it, I think. Thank you, Brad. All right, we're going to move on to our next application. Get information together here. This is a preliminary plan development, case number PD-2020-09-2588, located at 155 Mitchell Street. The purpose of this request is to amend an unbuilt plan development on a 1.7 acre parcel with commercial downtown, river downtown design area. zoning to construct a multifamily development with some commercial space. Before we move on, I want to make sure that everyone understands that we are coming tonight for the applicant to receive comments about this application. This is a preliminary discussion, and with whatever information the applicant receives, the applicant will be coming back again with his or her application for a vote, but no vote tonight. All right, Rick, could you give us information, please?
Yes, ma'am. This is the location map. Again, the property is 155 Mitchell Street. You can see it's close to Williams Street and Baldwin Street. The aerial map here is the undeveloped property at this time. So this is an amendment of a previously approved plan development from 2017. Again, it just hasn't been built. The parcel is about 1.7 acres. The proposal is an 8-story structure. There's 5 floors above 3 levels of parking. There's 340 bedrooms, which is the maximum density allowed, which will be split among 155 units or dwelling units. 229 parking spaces are within the deck and 17 spaces behind the building, and a surface lot. The first level, or at least one floor, is commercial. That's, as mentioned earlier, the grade of the property slopes where the part that is on the ground level, one part of the building becomes almost like a second story at another part of the building. So, but one level would be commercial. There's a variance that was approved earlier, about a few years ago, by the hearings board for a riparian buffer encroachment. There's a creek behind the property. And this shows the creek again, just riparian buffer behind the property. So you don't have to deal with that issue tonight. It's already been dealt with by the hearings board. So there's 2 waivers have been requested. These waivers are the same as requested back in 2017 to require at least 50% of the ground floor be leasable commercial. And this again becomes the definition of what is the ground floor. As some of the ground floor again is ground in one area, but the second floor in another area. And then we have the waiver that 70% of the linear frontage of structured parking must consist of leasable commercial residential space. And in this case, the downhill portion is not covered by other uses. It is looking into the parking deck on the ground, the lower part of the slope. The future land use of downtown would remain, as well as the zoning. The current zoning is commercial downtown, river, downtown design area, plan development. This is the previously approved master plan from a few years ago. You can see at the time they had a driveway coming in to do like a loop for drop off there at the front of the building. Another drive was to come in at the end of the property and go into the deck in a few areas. And this is the current proposal. In this case, you would have a driveway at each end of the property. The middle would be just a pedestrian entrance. This is showing the lower level parking, but this would be an area in the center of the property where the pedestrians would enter, whereas you'd have a parking deck entrance on each end. Some of that going around the back of the building. This is the approved architecture, current binding architecture from a few years ago. And then this is the current proposal. Although the couple floors have been removed, the height itself is only a few feet shorter than what was approved a few years ago. Okay, and again, we're talking about the lower levels of 3 levels of parking. And then you get into the leasable areas, the level of commercial, as well as the upstairs residential is a cross section here in the pink, showing the commercial area, and then the residential above. These pictures were taken in an earlier case, but it's pretty much the same conditions as now. This is the Mitchell Street frontage of the property. You can see at the time the variance was being heard at that time when this picture was taken, but it's still the same as today. Across the street, we have some townhomes, attached townhomes. The bottom picture is taken from within the property out towards those townhomes across Mitchell Street. So this is tonight a preliminary plan development to receive with comments. Again, the differences are that we have an increase in number of bedrooms with a decrease in commercial, as well as a decrease of parking. An increase of multifamily developments has been, as mentioned earlier, has been happening recently, somewhat tipping the balance of land use in the downtown area and throughout Athens-Clarke County. We have 8,000 to 10,000 units being built in the last couple of years, built or going through permitting or through a rezoning process. The Fire Marshal's office needs more detailed dimensions of the emergency vehicle turnaround in the back of the building. There's more information also that we've asked for from planning for the binding site plan to include, including a breakdown of the number of bedrooms in each dwelling unit so we can confirm parking compliance, as well as a detailed commercial level floor plan so we can confirm compliance with the 50% commercial space, and also the requirement for separated commercial and residential access. And again, this is basically the first three levels, but that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Rick. And now we'll hear from the applicant. Is Mr. King?
Yes.
Are you giving this presentation?
Yes, I have myself and one of my colleagues, Jeff Zalisko, who's with Intuitive Vision Architect. He and I will share the time.
Okay, you're on.
Rick, do you mind sharing our presentation? If you just click to the next slide, please. As I said, my name is Rodney King. I'm Senior Vice President of Development at Core Spaces. I'll just give you a brief overview of Core Spaces. We're based out of Chicago, Illinois. We were established in 2010 by two of our principals. We're one of the nation's most active kind of collegiate housing developers. We develop, acquire, and manage our own properties. We have offices in Chicago and in Austin, Texas. I live in actually Memphis, Tennessee, neither one of those. Rick, if you don't mind, what's the next slide? Here are some of our projects kind of scattered across the country. We have projects in Lexington, Kentucky, Auburn, Alabama, Gainesville, Florida, which we kind of consider similar size, similar SEC type markets. Next slide, please. One of the things that we learned throughout our study of the market is the previous project is probably not financially feasible anymore. We all know that the condo market and typical kind of economic environments is one of the first markets to show stress. So we started to study this project to see what could we actually do. And throughout our study, we learned that there is a great need in Athens for kind of affordable housing that is close to the university. Right now, to kind of point to Rick's comment, the overall market in Athens is about 99% occupied. So although there have been a lot of units developed over the previous years, all of them have been absorbed, and the market is telling us that more housing is needed. And because of the market is so highly occupied, that is driving up rents and driving down affordability. So we saw a unique opportunity to bring some affordability into the downtown market. As you can see, the top four comps that we looked at are in the downtown market: the Martha Standard, Georgia Heights, and Uncommon. And our site is down here in the red star. Next slide, please. So all these properties, when they were developed to the higher end student housing. As I said, we saw an opportunity to do something different here. So our affordability strategy will introduce 15 to 20% of affordable units starting as low as approximately $665. That is significantly lower than any of the previous developments. Our goal is to tap into this kind of price sensitive market who wants to be close to the university, but they just frankly just priced out. So that's primarily our goal in our rent strategy. That we will have some unique bedrooms to kind of target this and execute on this strategy. Now I'll let Jeff walk through the actual project, and we'll reserve the balance of the time for questions.
Thank you, Rodney. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jeff Salisco. I'm a senior principal with Antunovich Associates. We're architects collaborating with Core Spaces on this project. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is just an aerial giving a little bit of a view of the university in front and then some of the city in the rear. Next slide, please. And then another aerial just giving context of our site with relationship to the university. Next slide, please. Here you're seeing our site on Mitchell, as Richard had shown earlier, with Williams and then Osanee. Sorry, we have Oak Street. Don't ask me why we have that there, but that gives you a little bit of a context and where we sit within the neighboring streets. Next slide, please. This is an important slide. This is what we call our first floor, but there is a parking level below it. From the left side of the site on Mitchell Street to the right side, we slope over 24 feet. So where you see our entrance, that would be our entrance to residential lobby, leasing, commercial, retail spaces. So we would provide access all through that point. This slide shows that we have 39 parking spaces, but it also has half of this, the area on this floor, which is part of this waiver that was provided for the previous project, is provided here. So we are providing that same 50% of the floor plate for the first floor level. Other thing I want to point out is along the street behind the sidewalk, we are 20 feet, we are set back 20 to 22 feet. We will have lush landscaping behind that sidewalk line. So that's a very important point. Also, keep going. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is the lower level that Richard had shown earlier, and our access to the rear is along the right side, kind of to the south of the site. That provides access, fire access to the rear. We have worked very closely with the fire marshal's office and also with the solid waste department for access for refuse trucks and for fire trucks. I think we've really provided that, and we'll work through that with them further, but we've gone to great detail to provide that. So this lowest level has parking, primarily parking. There's 85 spaces on this level. We also are set back less than that previous project was. Actually, we are set within the stream buffer intrusion, 10,074 square feet, where the previous project was over 11,000. So next slide, please. This is then the upper level parking. You see the access to that on the left side off of Marshall. So all in, we have 208 parking spaces. Those parking spaces will meet the zoning requirement for the type of units that we provide in this. So we will be meeting and be compliant with those requirements. Next slide, please. This is saying 4 to 6 levels, but it's actually the third floor to the 7th floor. And typical floor has 33 units and 72 bedrooms. So this is the 3rd floor through the 7th. Also, when you look at this, notice the articulation of the building. This will come into play in a big way when we look at the exterior design more closely. But that's what we have on those levels. Next slide, please. We then have 23 units and 52 bedrooms on the top level. That top level is also occupied by an outdoor amenity space, which includes a pool element. So so that's what we have on top of the floor. That's a one-off floor plate. Next slide, please. This building section, really running parallel with Mitchell, shows how the street slopes from one end to the other. And you see how right in the middle is where we have our commercial areas. So those are located in the center. That's why we have that location there, because that's really the center point of this as we're running down Mitchell Street. Also, I want to point out here, although our building is 95 feet high, that's really just the elevator overrun. The effective top of the building is actually only 84 feet, and that's at the lowest point. At the bottom of the hill, it's 84 feet. At the top of the hill, it's actually less than 65 feet. because the building is level across the top. So really effectively, it is lower than the requirement indicates. Next slide, please. Another section, I'm not really telling that much more. I don't want to spend that much time other than you're seeing that commercial area on that middle level. Thank you. Next slide, please. Just want to hit some of in the area analysis, some of the main numbers. We have 155 units, 340 bedrooms, 208 parking spaces. I want to point out when we're talking about this, that the 208 parking spaces in these residential units, they almost are like storage lots. Those cars do not move very often, and there's a lot less parking spaces, although it's going to be compliant with the requirements than the previous building would have had. Next slide, please. This is pictures of really the surrounding buildings. The one in the top center is directly across the street, mostly residential in character, the buildings that you're seeing surrounding us. So we wanted to be really sensitive to this when we're looking at the building. Next slide, please. This is really a concept slide, and we wanted this building to be very indigenous to Athens. We wanted our building to have be very residential in character. And we wanted it to have traditional points to it, but also we wanted to have a modern feel. So we wanted to bring both of those things into it. Next slide, please. We think renderings are way better, so we want to show you these. So this is looking across from the top of Mitchell. Again, you see this elegant white brick in contrast to this the grayish areas, which is corrugated metal, fiber cement panels, very modern character in the roof dormers, so very elegant in character. Next slide, please. Seeing this from the hill, you see our top access to the garage. Next slide, please. Just moving closer up and down the hill. Next slide, please. This one, you're starting to see that main entry point, the lobby point. Next slide, please.
Where is the main entrance point? Would you point it out to me, please?
In the middle, it's in the middle of the building. So it's the area where you see where it says hub, that's the entry point.
Okay.
Next slide, please. And then we show an outdoor terrace, and this is for use for the retail and commercial spaces. And you can see as you're coming up the street, this is going to be a place of activity. We think it's really important that this element is there, and you can just see how that's going to be just teeming with people as it's occupied. Next slide, please. And then the overall building at the top to the right, that's where the pool is located, and there's a pergola type element at the top also. Next slide. Actually, the next 4 slides are elevations, and I feel like these renderings are so much more useful. I don't really want to touch on those. We're running short on time. I wanted to get to a comparison sheet at the back. If you go to the last sheet. So.
About 1 minute, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. So the previous PD was really a taller building. Our building is shorter. We have less levels. We do have more units and beds. However, that was a condominium building. This is a student-based housing building. So there are going to be more beds and more units. We have less parking spaces, but again, that's because that was a condominium building, a residential use that has more need for parking. We have lower requirements for that. We're set back 22 feet instead of 45 feet, which their building is. However, our encroachment in the rear is 1,000 square feet less. So we were kind of balancing that as we were dealing with the job site. So I think our time is running out. Thank you very much, and we would love to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move to public comment. Do we have anyone in the auditorium who would like to speak in favor of this?
Yes, we do.
All right. If you would step forward to the microphone, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Upchurch with Coal Banker Upchurch Realty, and I reside at 2035 Timothy Road. And I want to start off by thanking you all for the service that y'all provide. And I appreciate you taking the time to be our planning commission. Let me see, I'm speaking in favor of and would like to see this project completed at 155 Mitchell Street. This project is consistent with the surrounding properties. It's not anything that's not already being taken advantage of. The units around it are conforming, and so I think it would be a good fit there One of the things I'm most excited about is the walkability factor that it brings with it. It's going to be student housing, and it's going to be close to campus. It's going to be close to downtown. It's going to be closest to places to eat. So this will take traffic out of the neighborhoods, Green Acres, different neighborhoods that students tend to live in. This will bring them closer to campus. And so the walkability factor is, this is a perfect thing for this site. So with that being said, it's going to take cars off the road. It's going to take cars off of Lexington Road. It's going to take cars off of College Station Road. And they literally would be able to come and park their cars in the garage and not have to move it until they get ready to go back home. So those are just some factors that I've thought about that I felt like were really good. The property's been undeveloped for many, many years. And I think that we can trust and know that the developers are going to do a great job. They take great pride in their work. And again, I'm excited about them being a part of it. So that's all I'll say. And I know that y'all will be voting on this at a later time, but I do appreciate y'all considering it. And again, I hope they'll be able to pull this off and make it something we're all real proud of. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have others who would like to speak in support of this application?
Yes, indeed. My name is Roby Redwine, 1031 Shoals Drive. I will certainly echo Charlie. We appreciate everyone's commitment and service to the community. Thank you for the opportunity. I am also representing Core Spaces in my role as commercial agent at Coldwell Banker. I think the main point I would make, quite candidly, is walking distance. We all like to walk, or at least I do. It may not look like it, but we all typically do like to get out and about. I went on the tax assessor's website this afternoon and pulled some numbers, and also via Google Maps. This site is 0.3 miles from 480 East Broad Street. The old building downtown that I used to work in, quite candidly. It is also 0.3 miles from the undergraduate admissions office at the University of Georgia. It's a half a mile from Sanford Stadium. And also, I think very importantly, a half a mile from the nearest residential home, 257 South Poplar. To me, this project makes sense. It will not be cumbersome on our present year-round residents, quite candidly. I also feel very strongly, I've gotten to know Rodney King over the last couple of years and represented him to try to bring a project to Athens. I feel very comfortably that Core is going to do their best to provide something that is very worthwhile, something that Athens can be proud of. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in support of this application? Yes, sir. If you'd step to the microphone, please.
My name is Carl Nichols. I live at 850 Beaver Dam Road, Willowville, Georgia. I've lived in Athens-Clarke County since 1976. Where I live on 90 acres out in the country, and I've seen change in that area over the years. When I first moved to Beaver Dam Road, there were 5 houses on Beaver Dam Road. Today, there are 3 subdivisions, a numerous amount of duplexes that were built for student rental housing. But today, they're occupied by most of the people who need affordable housing. Change, change, change. What I've seen over this last 15 years is the students who used to want to live out of the city, now they want to live back directly in the city and downtown at all. I am a part owner of 155 Mitchell Street. 3 years ago, you and my partners, we planned to rezone the property that we'd had for 14 years and developed it and looked and thought that condominiums was the thing that needed to be down there. But as time went on, and as we saw things happening within Athens and within this COVID-19 situation here now, condominiums are not what we need in downtown Athens. People of my age and that would live in a senior condominium area, they don't want to be in town. They want to be out secure by themselves. Four Spaces came to us and asked us if we would sell this project. Mitchell Street is not a neighborhood. It's an area that is vacant, adjacent to the university on three sides, and it needs to be something that can happen. A student who comes there can walk to the university, they can walk downtown, and when Charlie Upchurch sold my line, and I basically said, when a student drives to Athens, Georgia, from home and lives in this facility, they park their car and they don't get in that car again until they get ready to go back home again. So they can walk to school, they walk downtown and to their classes and to the dining and all. The other thing that I think is vitally important is that the student population continues to grow at the University of Georgia. Also, in this community, as our community begins to grow, I think it's very prevalent that today, thank goodness, we only spend $37,000 a year on ad valorem taxes. When this project is built, I think that it will produce over $700,000 in ad valorem taxes, which Athens-Clarke County needs for special housing purposes, for our school board, and the money that we raise, that would raise, would help to level the education and research and resources provided for our problem. I and my partners fully support this project that CORE is fixing to do, would like to do. Thank you very much. And thank y'all all for your time and the experience and what you do for Athens-Clarke County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak in support of this application?
We do not.
Do we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application?
We do not.
All right. Then I guess I need to ask you, the applicant, have a opportunity for a 2-minute rebuttal. Since no one has spoken in opposition, do you need your 2 minutes? Shall we move forward?
No, Madam Chair, we'll just reserve the questions that you have in for us.
Thank you. All right, then we'll come behind the rail. Comments, questions? Jeff.
Yeah, this proposal is interesting. I'll say that there are some things that I like about it. The building shape is interesting, I guess. I like the, especially given our last conversation, we've gotten rid of some parking places, and ordinarily that's great. But first of all, there's 340 beds, so we assume that there are 340 students coming from out of town and driving here and parking their cars and walking everywhere they go until it's time to go home again. But 111 will not have a parking place on site. So that's a rhetorical question. Maybe you can answer that when we see this project again. But my main objection is the same one that I had last time to this, I guess, is that it's a huge, dense project on one of the narrowest streets in the downtown area. Mitchell Street is narrow, it's steep, and while we don't have 290 parking places, we still have 229 people who will inevitably be going in and out. There's no grocery store. They can't walk to the grocery store, so they're going to drive there at a minimum. Yes, there's already an approved project on the site, but I don't see any reason to increase the density, and I don't really see any reason to force more cars out into the community somehow. And I'm just not sure what the benefit to Athens is. So that's my comment, and those are comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice?
Thank you very much. I agree with what Jeff said. So I'm really stuck on this idea that that this development will add more affordable bedrooms to downtown. And I think I heard the number 665. Mr. King, is that right? 665?
Approximately, yes.
Is that per bedroom?
It is per bedroom, and that is about 35% lower than the current market in the downtown market.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. It is less expensive than the developments that are in the immediate area. But you know, I'm reading the staff report, and I've been doing a lot of work on affordable housing myself in the last several years, but last few months especially. And the staff report tells us that we have 6,500 new multifamily housing units in our bedrooms in the last 2 years. I understand that even if many of them are, you know, much more expensive than 665 a bedroom, and Mr. Nichols referred to the ever-growing student population. My understanding is that the student population is growing at a much more moderate level. We're not just continually adding tons of new students every year. So I just have a hard time understanding why we need more affordable housing downtown when affordable is defined by 65 a bedroom, which is not what we normally call affordable housing. So I am concerned for the same reasons that Jeff is talking about, the street itself. And you know, to be fair, you know, it's all public record. This body didn't want to even rezone this to commercial downtown at the time that it got rezoned, but it did. So we can't do anything about that. But I'm just having a very hard time accepting the need for more of this kind of housing close to campus. I'll stop there.
Lucy.
Okay, sorry about that. I read the Chronicle of Higher Education every morning, and COVID is causing problems not just all here in Athens, but all over the country. And we are seeing a total change in how higher education is being handled. Specifically, I'm going to talk to the level of online learning, and online learning is not necessarily meaning the people are going to be renting apartments or renting rooms in an apartment in Athens per se. And I worry a lot about putting this many more units out there, or beds out there at this time when we've got so many others that are coming online in Clarke County, and that I do not see the University of Georgia growing at a rate that would absorb this many new units, including this one. And I think we need to understand that the University of Georgia is not just Athens. The University of Georgia also has campuses in Gwinnett, in Griffin and Tifton, and that you have a lot of students learning in a different format than they used to when they would come here, spend 4 years, 5 years, whatever it took, and go to classes in classroom buildings. It's not happening that way anymore. And I'm really afraid we are going to put a glut of multifamily housing that will not be used in the way they want to. And I worry also about conversions. Looking at the ones that were done with the 200 bedroom units per acre downtown over the years, a lot of those are not going to be able to be converted easily. They are 4 bedroom, 4 bath units. We haven't even discussed bathrooms in these. We're talking about 2 and 3 bedroom units, but are they also 2 and 3 bathroom units with a shared living space? Those are very hard to convert to family housing or other types of rental housing with family units as opposed to students. And I'm just a little bit worried that this may be something that is not going to be successful and that it may not be needed, and certainly not in the coming years. I will tell you that everybody thinking there's going to be a vaccine for COVID that is somehow miraculously going to take care of things. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist today has an article about the failures of that kind of attitude and how long it takes for a vaccine to come on board for people to be able to be effectively immune to a deadly disease. Polio is a good example. And that there is no magic bullet that's going to come anytime, I would say, in at least the next 5 to 6 years. And it may not come then. So I think we have to look at what the current situation is and project what it will be like in the next 10 years. I don't see the University of Georgia growing in large numbers. There was 1 year back in the 90s when they decided to lift the cap from about, I think it was about 27,000. They lifted the cap to something like 33,000. It may have crept up to as much as 35,000, but I think that includes those satellite campuses too. So I think we need to be very careful about how we look at multifamily housing in this town, especially with the number of units that have already been approved or already in the pipeline. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Lucy. Joey?
First, I'll say I'm no scientist, so I don't know when a COVID cure will come. So I'm going to hold hope that that'll be sooner than later. I would like to say I do like the aspect of the affordable housing to it. I know the 665, that is affordable and for downtown. I like that aspect. As Mr. Nichols noted, property, on the east side, west side, as you build downtown properties, those properties then become available. They could then become affordable housing for other people. So it's people moving around the area. I think it's for where this is located. I see the university continuing, whether it be very minimal, growing every year. I know it's done it since I've been here, since I've been in town for the last 25 years. I believe the university's kind of creeped up just a little bit every year. So I don't see us not growing in this community. Athens is such a strong, vibrant community. And where this property is located, this makes sense. I was not on the commission when the first development came through. So I was not a part of those discussions. I do know what was already approved. And from looking at this, I like this better. I like what this shows better. This design looks better. And frankly, this location is better than the 4 comps that was brought forth to compare it to. So I do think we need to look at this, talk about it, see where we can find the aspects of it, and work with these developers, because I think it's a good property that deserves this based on the location to the university.
Do we have other comments, Kristen? And then Matt.
Yeah, I guess Now, I remember when this came before the commission a few years ago. I did not like the project then. I do not like the idea of adding more density and apartments that are really only for students. I find it a little bit ironic, actually, talking about affordable housing and then to only talk about student housing. The developments that are shown on that slide where there's a discussion of affordable housing are really the reason why we have such a crisis of affordable housing in Athens. I was curious, the number 665 per bedroom, is that for a studio apartment or is that for just any bedroom in the entire unit, entire building? Hey, you guys, please. Sorry.
We haven't gotten down to that level of kind of detail of the unit plans yet, but we do project to have at least 15 to 20% of those units renting at approximately.
Oh, so the entire project will have rates at below whatever the market is going. Just a portion of those are going to be lower.
Correct. Our goal is to put 15 to 20% rooms that are what we call price sensitive. That is 20 to 30% below the market.
Okay.
And just kind of regarding student housing, obviously, we cannot prohibit anybody from living there. Just about the sheer location alone, we think that the majority of the residents will be students. So, but anybody's open to live there if they qualify. So that is the housing standard.
I mean, it's an interesting point you make. I actually wrote an article. I read a column in the local paper here, and you know, with the idea that I want to go to the standard and rent an apartment for myself and my child. And there was a policy in place there that once that child is over 18 months, I would have to pay for a second bedroom. So now you're telling me as a woman and a child that I would have to pay $1,200 a month to live in this building that is downtown and provides housing. And so this is where, you know, it's just, honestly, it made me angry that like basically an entire portion of our community would not ever have access to this building. One other question I had for you, I noticed on the Core Spaces website, there's a statement that we tailor all our projects to their markets by drawing inspiration from the local architecture, residents, and culture. I thought it was kind of interesting when you showed that concept slide. It kind of looked like Charleston. And I'm just wondering if you really did think about Athens when you designed this project, because I don't know what those images were on that concept slide, but they were not Athens. So what about Athens is represented in this project?
Obviously, those concept slides, and I'll let Jeff kind of chime into this, they were concepts. We're not married to any of the design. So if there's something that we need to improve on, we're willing to do that. You know, we're here to seek your comments and modify as needed. So we're not married to the design presented tonight. If we need to be, you know, more engaged and more involved in Athens to really get that culture, it is our duty to do that. I just want to remind you that, you know, kind of based on the data, we're willing to invest tens of millions of dollars here, you know, kind of based on the data that we've seen, you know, based on what we think. So we want to get it right. So if there's some things that we need to improve upon, you know, feel free to tell us. Jeff, I'll let you speak to the design portion of it.
Yeah, we were looking at the area that we were in, and the slides that you saw were from different places. They were not necessarily Athens, so that was astute of you to see that. But really, we wanted this building with the scale that it is to have a really strong residential feel, and we did not want it to only be traditional in character. We wanted there to be something of a modern feeling. We feel where it's appropriate that student residence type buildings are like that. It should be forward thinking and shouldn't be, you know, truly only traditional. So that's where, you know, we were kind of looking at this building. We wanted to have elements that feel comfortable and feel right in Athens, but that was part of how we got to the design vocabulary that we got to.
Do we have anyone else like to speak? Who was Matt? Who? Yes, Matt. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, I also was not on the Planning Commission when the previous version of this project came through, but I did follow it pretty attentively as a citizen. And my impression was that the ultimate approval of it was based in part on the idea that owner-occupied downtown housing was a niche that was underserved currently in Athens. And I'm not somebody who says, we have too much student housing, because UGA is growing and there's nothing we can do to control that. The numbers that I've seen, I recall that they grew by 4,200 students just from 2014 to 2018. In 5 years, they grew by 12%, which was 4,200 students. And so you look at the MARC, the standard, Georgia Heights, and that god-awful Uncommon building, and add up all the bedrooms together. And we have not even, although it feels like a building spree to many Athenians, it hasn't even kept up with the increased number of students. And so in a sense, I'm sympathetic to the idea that additional student housing is needed due to circumstances well beyond the Planning Commission and the Marion Commission's control, because there are more students and there are going to be more next year and there are going to be more the year after that. And to the extent that there's not new housing built to house them, they're going to occupy existing housing, which is going to further exacerbate the supply-demand imbalance that we have in our marketplace. So I'm sympathetic to the idea of more student housing generally, but I also think that a proposal to change this project feels a little bit like a bait and switch, given that it only got here. It only got from RM2 to commercial downtown zoning by pitching an idea that downtown owner-occupied residential housing would be a contribution to Athens, to the community. So I'm not crazy about the change to the plan. I'm willing to be educated on the idea, but I'm highly skeptical of the idea that the existing project as approved is not economically feasible. I don't know. I've never built a 75-foot tall building. So there's a lot I don't know, but it just strikes me that of course it's economically feasible. It's just that student housing tends to be more profitable than owner-occupied housing. And so I suspect that that's probably what's driving this. And it may be that Athens is better served by the project that's approved being built than by these proposed changes. And the last thing I'm going to say is on the affordability front, I'd be interested in hearing from the applicant. You're talking about a pretty significant increase in density for, and in a way sort of trading, hey, there'll be some affordable bedrooms, semi-affordable, more affordable than the other downtown student housing. And then you describe it as a goal, and I just want to confirm there's no binding mechanism at all in your plan, right? If you guys built the property and then had more applicants than you had bedrooms, and you wanted to rent all the bedrooms for $900 a bedroom, under your proposal, you'd be legally allowed to do that, right? You're not committing to some sort of binding affordability program, or am I wrong about that?
Oh, we're not committing. We could kind of discuss the mechanisms in detail a little bit more, but I don't want to make that commitment to kind of a legal binding thing. But regarding kind of the affordability, they will be.
The waivers.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
We're hearing.
I think we can hear you in the background there.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. But the affordable units are kind of a proprietary unit that we design at Core that we want to introduce to this market. To say that unit can compete with a non-affordable unit is likely not going to be the case. So even though we're not legally bound, and we are willing to kind of make some commitments that you guys can hold us to, that unit probably won't command the same rent level as a unit at the standard of the MARC.
Are there any other questions? I have a few before. All right, Sarah.
Just a few kind of thoughts and notes. Obviously, for those of you on the commission at the time, definitely wasn't a fan of the original rezone. And something that I do appreciate about this new proposal is that I never bought the whole scheme of the first proposal. I did not think that, whether intentional or not, I do not think that it was going to play out how they thought it was going to play out. I felt like it was going to turn into game day condos. And so that being said, I do really appreciate that this new application is just stating honestly exactly what they intend to do. And I appreciate that. And if you are going to have student housing in Athens for that would primarily serve UGA students, this is a great location. In some ways, the gentleman who made the point about it not really being a residential neighborhood is true, in the sense that it's not a single family residential neighborhood, but I do think it's an appropriate location for student housing. And so my question about this application is, I think everyone made good points. I think it is good to maybe revisit the concept board. And I definitely had the same thought Kristen did. I just felt like it was a little, it's not that Charleston is not appropriate for Athens. It's a cool style. I know you see it all over town a little bit, but it's definitely kind of a Charleston type style, transported to Athens or imported to Athens. But to me, I just have bigger questions about the problems that we're trying to solve in Athens related to housing affordability. Mr. King mentioned that, affordable housing is a challenge in Athens. Affordable housing for students, like when we have tried to characterize our affordable housing problem, it's like Kristen said, it is a problem that has been kind of exacerbated by affordable housing. And what we're looking for is workforce housing. I think we just kind of need to be honest with ourselves that this is not necessarily what that would be. This is not filling that niche that we've identified that we want to fill. That being said, I still see the merits in the project. I do like this project better than the previous one. Just generally, I like it better. But the one point, the most important point to me might be, I don't know, this question about whether you can, there's nothing that would legally sort of bind you to keep these units affordable. But the bigger point I want to make is about timing. And that is that, fingers crossed, our community is within, I don't know how long, less than a year, of hopefully coming to some conclusions about a voluntary inclusionary zoning program that would not necessarily, there's a lot of elements to that we've been discussing, but I think that approving this development prior to that program taking place, and I don't know how that fits into sort of this unique situation and we're amending a PD. And so, I guess I need a little clarification on that, but I think it's a real opportunity. And in fact, one of the things we've talked about when we've discussed inclusionary zoning is that it's a bummer we didn't get this sorted out before these other student housing developments happened in this area, because while we don't necessarily think that affordable housing units need to be put into student housing, like that might not necessarily be compatible, but it certainly allows for developers to request something that they want, whether it's higher density or from a list of things, and that the community gets some sort of influx of funds into our affordable housing fund in order to use it in a way that would benefit us. And so I guess I'm saying all that because my concern has more to do with timing and sort of wanting to have a discussion and maybe the gentleman behind this application can, talk a little bit with planning staff about, what that might be and sort of timing of things. They probably know better than I do, but I just want to bring that up because we really want to see something like this happen in our community. We want to see developments like this one help us solve the other problems that we have related to affordable housing. Okay, I think that's all I've got. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I don't know if you wanted me to answer that or not.
Yeah, that would be
Do you
great.
have a question, Sarah?
My question is, would you please respond to what I just said?
Heaven help us, we'll be here all night. Go ahead.
I'll try. Directly to your question is yes, we are willing to kind of entertain that notion and concept with the planning staff. And primarily just kind of, throughout our business across the country. One of the reasons that, affordable housing is lacking in most of these communities is because of the market equilibrium. I think Mr. Hall said it, the supply demand dynamics are out of balance in that. The market today, post-COVID, 99% leased, and it's about 98% occupied. So there's did not show up in that highest occupiable country right now. So post-COVID, pre-COVID, our experience in business is students only want the online. They don't want the online experience. They want the traditional college experience. And whenever the COVID situation is straightened out a year from now, no college experience. And Athens is projected to grow 1.5% to 2% for the foreseeable future. The university is pushing 40,000 students today, and they're going to get up to 45,000. If you're not growing as a university, you're going to be financially hamstrung. So we do see this project as a potential opportunity to invest in some other projects that the city may benefit more.
Anyone else? I have a few things. I had some things when I came in that I wanted to ask, and suddenly my paper has filled up with other things that I want to ask. I have a couple of questions. I want to know why you moved the building so much closer to the street.
Jeff, answer that. You're on mute, Jeff.
I don't even see Jeff. Where is he?
I'm here.
Oh,
the
there
original
you-
building had a drive in the front. It was really planned in an entirely different way. And we really wanted to make the center of the building the main entry point. And so we have an entry up at the top of the building, the other one's back around the rear. We felt that a building that's 20 to 22 feet setback is actually a quite reasonable setback. It's not sitting right on top of the street. And then we set back quite a bit beyond that. We also were struggling along the rear. Frankly, the rear, the way they dealt with the rear in the previous building, we didn't think was really feasible. You have to be set back even further to make that work. So we provided more room around the way. We made that all work back there. So that actually worked with the fire trucks, with the refuse trucks and all that. So it ended up, frankly, just moving towards the front to make the building really work for us and work in the back. Again, a 22 foot setback from the street is a very reasonable. If you go in your downtown with buildings this size, my guess is very few of them have a 22 foot setback from the street as this one does. So we thought that was quite reasonable.
Okay. It negates the use of a lot of green, or let's just say it negates as much green as you could have. So some environmental greenery in the front would be much to my preference. And the more you take away space to do that, then the more you have to eliminate that. So that's the relation of my comment to what you've done.
That said, I just want to, can I just say one point on that? They had a driveway in front. They didn't have much greenery because of that. My guess is we have more. And it's our intent to plant that quite lushly. It's going to make the building look better. It's going to feel better. And frankly, it's not that expensive to do that. And so we plan on, providing, off the bat, mature plant material that will have an impact from day one. And a lot of it.
And I'll just comment a little bit.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Mr. King.
I'll say, just to make sure that the commercial uses are successful, you want to be as close to the street as reasonably possible. This is going to be a multiple location. Now, people can't see and experience that kind of walkability. Uses will not be successful.
Which leads me right into my next question. Commercial doesn't mean atrium. And so I heard you say this is the commercial area and this is the atrium, and maybe you didn't mean that the commercial area that you had designated as commercial included the atrium. But my question is, does it? That isn't commercial.
We don't have a building. That may have been just a mischaracterization. It will be true commercial. We are looking at users. Frankly, this side of Mitchell Street is not highly populated like it is on Broad. So we're looking at very specific users who want to come here. We can kind of serve the building and serve the immediate neighborhood. But it does not include the atrium. So I did want to point out that a portion of our terrace is kind of indoor-outdoor space. And we think that is beneficial to the commercial area and the success of it, especially in Athens.
Okay, I have to be really honest with you and say I am normally a 100% having half the area be commercial. I don't know where I am on this one, so I'm more interested in why you're asking for a waiver for commercial. I mean, is it just what we all think? I think I can't make it go, so I'm asking to waive the amount. I need to kind of know why you are asking for a reduction in commercial.
We're meeting the 50% threshold. The reason for the waiver is because I think how Brad and Rick said it is how you define the first floor. We want the commercial to be all on one level. Depth commercial will not be successful. There's about a 20 to 25 foot grade drop from one side of the property to the next. If you went by the technical letter of the law, of the code, we would have commercial above and below each other.
Right. Well, not necessarily above and below. It wouldn't necessarily have to be above and below. It could be at this level on one floor and this level on the other floor, but that's not above and below.
Oh, not sure I follow, but
right. It would follow the grade, and we're proposing that at the medium grade, we provide the commercial, but then we have that it's very visible then as it continues towards the south side of the site where we have that terrace. So there's great visibility of that, as you're coming off of Williams. So we think that being up high at one end with access from the center, it's not a very far walk to get around to it to the side. Just makes it a better condition. It is very tricky for us to have that commercial step up with the slope that it has. It's really a steep slope. So we just felt that to have it on one level is going to give it the best chance to succeed.
We would end up with basement level commercial, which would frankly be very difficult to lease and very difficult to find an operator to use. And I think one of the most unsuccessful things is to have empty space. Sure. I don't think that's the intent of the code.
I don't think anyone would suggest putting commercial in the basement. I don't think any of us would make that recommendation. I do think there's a way to handle it. I'm very aware of the property and the grade on the property, and also I do have a good grasp of that. I was just curious to hear you say why. Now, for me, I was not in favor of the project in the beginning either. But one of my very major concerns had to do with traffic in the area. It's kind of hard to throw this many cars into an alley, and that's basically what Mitchell Street is. It certainly was a street, and it certainly had housing on both sides of it, but a whole different single-family mill houses is kind of different than, or duplex mill houses. There were some duplex mill houses there. So the traffic, I'm just not convinced, in spite of the fact that our traffic folks say it'll handle it. I'm still not convinced it'll handle it. Up and down and street parking, and I don't see how that many automobiles can be in and out of that area without congestion that almost becomes unbearable. But again, I'm not a traffic person. I just know the area really well. And I just don't, the whole idea of that much traffic on what is the equivalent of an alley is illogical to me. It doesn't make sense. That's probably my pontification. There's no question there. I just wanted to say that. I do want to ask about rock. Have you all, have you explored the whole rock issue under the property, and have you built that into your cost system, because it will be enormous?
We have performed kind of the geotech analysis, and I'll let Jeff speak to this. That is somewhat driving the shape of the building. We've consulted with a local general contractor, which is another point. A local general contractor will build this building. But that is somewhat driving kind of the lower level and the first level of this building, trying to stay out of that rock. And I think to Mr. Hall's point earlier, that's the reasons why the previous building is somewhat economically out of balance now. So we studied that, and that is assumed in this design.
If you look at what's the lower level of the lower level plan, the parking plan, you'll see an area that's unexcavated. It's because of the characteristics, the strata of the characteristics is the worst spot. So we just didn't excavate that out at that location for that very reason. So we're very aware of the issues there, and that was one of the worst areas. We're going to have to spend some money because of what's underneath us, but that was the worst spot, and that's why. I mean, we would have been able to have 15 more parking spaces there, but they would have cost a fortune. So we ended up, yeah.
Yeah, I think the rock, this is just an FYI. I think the rock is going to be a huge, huge, huge problem for you. The rock is not way down. The rock is almost surface level. I recently was responsible for putting a sign up at a facility very close to there, and we couldn't get the sign up. And so, I mean, the rock is Stone Mountain granite, and so all the way from there. So I think that's a huge issue. And so I guess I'm more worried that you'll get started on something and then go, oh, well, we can't do this because we can't get through this rock. In this big, if you were digging a 3x5 space, or even a small building, but this size building and that much rock just seems a real handicap to me for anyone trying to develop anything there. So that also, I guess, is just an FYI. And then I wanted to say something about, well, I have two more things. One about the locale. The other is about affordability. I have, you can tell from the comments that have been made by commissioners that we've been, I was going to say knee deep. Maybe I should say neck deep in our study of how we can make housing more affordable in Athens. And so, one of the things you learn very quickly is that all levels of cost contain affordable housing. And so consequently, that doesn't mean they're affordable for people. It just means they are less costly than you build $1 million house and, you bring it down $400,000, $600,000, whatever. Anyway, it's more affordable than a million. And that's not what we're talking about. And I'm sure you know that, but that's what causes us to not be able to have an adequate conversation with people because we can't quite get our hands on a definition of what we really are meaning by affordable. I think Sarah's kind of brought it around to say what we're wanting is housing that is workforce housing, housing that would really help people who now absolutely cannot make that happen. So consequently, every time somebody comes into us and says, oh yeah, we'll make some of this affordable, I kind of cringe because that can mean a million things, and apt as not, it doesn't mean what we're trying to do. And so a $665 bedroom is probably not what our community really needs at this point in our development. Maybe we need it for student housing. I don't know. I'm a little worried about land. I mean, we've covered out the east side here. We down Oconee Street, up Oconee Street, behind Oconee Street, down East Broad. We've kind of filled it up with student housing. And that's what's close to town, and that's why it's filled it up. But when we start then trying to do what our community needs, which is to build housing that will really help people be able to have housing, I'm just a little worried we're going to be a day late and a dollar short in terms of land. So I think that's a huge issue. Okay, then my very last thing. It does have to do with my encouragement to you to learn about the area. This is the kind of song and dance I give every time somebody wants to build something in that area, but I'm going to keep giving it because I just encourage you to learn about the history, even of that street. I'm not saying the history of the area of the east side of Athens. I'm saying learn the history of the street itself. And I think you might rethink building a very modern kind of development there. The mill was there. That's where the mill was. And so it's a whole different kind of culture and place. And so I just encourage you to look, read, find out about that. You may ignore it, but don't build without finding out about it. That's kind of what I want to say. And I think that might be it.
We'll definitely do
everything I have. My 10 minutes are up. Is that right, Mr. Griffin? Okay. Anyone else? Then we thank you for coming. We've given you lots to think about, but I think everything that's been said is very important for you all to consider as you move forward with an application.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, commissioners.
All right, and we move to our last application of the evening. This is a request for a special use permit, SUP-2020-08-2516. It's located at 1060 Hull Road. And the purpose of this request is to seek approval of a special use permit for a family personal care home within a commercial general zoning district. Rick?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Rick. Okay.
Okay.
No.
One
Well,
moment.
Rick, you were just on mute.
Okay, 1 second. Can you see this okay now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the location map of the property. It's Hull Road. You can see it's close to Voiles Road. We have the Fresh Air Barbecue. There's a liquor store here. The aerial view shows that a little clearer. We have industrial beyond the railroad tracks. And Hull Road, Highway 72 there. The future land use general business would remain, and the zoning would just show the triangle for the special use symbol. So this is a family personal care home request, and that means 4 to 6 clients. This would have up to 6 clients. Existing house would remain as it is, perhaps with some minor modifications to meet the personal care home requirements, specifically of the state requirements for their license. So there's no requested variance with this request, and no change in future land use. And with all special uses, though, there is a binding architecture. In this case, it would be the existing house. There's no plans for additions, the existing site conditions, and then the application report. This is the survey that was done for the request. And a picture of the house in the front, and this is the picture in the back. The clients would come through the carport and enter this accessible entrance in the back. So again, the property and residence would not noticeably change. Chip generation should be similar to the single family, as the clients would not drive themselves. Interior only conversion of the existing house. And so therefore, staff does not see negative impacts on adjacent properties and recommends approval. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Rick. All right. We'll ask our applicant to come forward and share the application with us, please.
Hi, I'm Tawana Brown, and I am requesting a special use permit for this personal care home. Let's see. And with the application, I have 20 years of medical experience with 16 years of hospice experience. Also supervised a 54-bed facility and administrator at a 24-bed dementia facility. And I just feel like with a smaller home, especially now due to the pandemic, is in such high demands now because of the pandemic. It's like so many workers are out, and with this personal care home with the 6 residents, it'll be like a 1 to 6 ratio. And I mean, I work in the hospital too, and like I say, due to the pandemic, it's like instead of 1 to 10 residents, it's now we're up to like 1 to 15 or 1 to 20. And like I said, we're offering 24-hour care 7 days a week, 3 healthy meals a day, exercise, activities and exercise. Let me see. And like, well, with this small base home, it'll be more like a homely feeling instead of a institution.
All right. Does that conclude your comments, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Yeah, your time's up. If you have more to say, say it.
Yes, I think that's it. I mean, if you guys have any questions, then. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome.
Right, now we will move to public comment. Is there anyone in the auditorium that would like to speak in favor of this application? Ms. Brown, let me tell you how this works. You make your statement, and then we have public comment, those who are in favor, those who are opposed. Then it comes to the commission members to discuss And if they have questions, they'll ask you to step back to the microphone and answer those questions. They may or may not have any, because we have a good report.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you.
You just have a seat and wait on us and see if we need you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any people in the auditorium who would like to speak in favor of this application?
No, there is none.
Is there anyone in the auditorium who is opposed to this application?
No, there's not.
All right. Ms. Brown, in reality, you have 2 minutes to speak. Kind of, if someone says something you would like to correct, but since no one has said anything, do you need your 2 minutes, or shall we give that time to the commissioners for their discussion?
Time to the commissioners.
All right, that's great. All right, coming behind the bar, what are your comments, friends? Sarah.
I think this looks like a great proposal and can you hear me? Okay, I think this looks like a good proposal and a great use of this property. So I'm in favor.
Great. Someone else spoke. Who was that? Yes, Jeff?
I had my hand up to say the same thing that Sarah said, I guess. That yeah, sure.
Good. Other comments? Kristen?
I was gonna move for approval.
All right, let's make sure, any other discussion before we go for a motion here? Seeing none, Kristen, if you would like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve the special use permit.
I'll second.
Joey has the second. All right, are there any questions or further comments? I wanted to say I was kind of impressed with the house, and I'm not sure what where the entrance is. I'm not sure what that was built for, but it looks like it was built just perfectly for something like what you're requesting, and it just seemed perfectly designed for that. And I guess it wasn't, but you're lucky. I wanted to say that. All right. Any other comments or questions? Then we will move to a vote. Rick?
Morales?
Yes.
Rowland? Let's see. Lucy?
I think Lucy's not here. She knew she might have to leave early.
Okay. Scarborough?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Beresford?
Yes.
Goodrum?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
And Kinman?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right, Ms. Brown, that means that the commission will be recommending to the mayor and commission their approval of this application. All right, I think that concludes all of our applications. And we're going to move on in on our agenda. I think that under other business, we have 4 things. I would like to move subcommittee reports to the end. So, because that really is going to kind of serve as a mini work session for us in trying to conclude some of our affordable housing reporting. So we'll move on to Planning Commission Chair's report, and I have none. Mr. Griffin, do you have a report?
I do not have a report this evening, no ma'am.
All right. Any miscellaneous announcements? Wow, we're just great, aren't we? All right, so now we're going to move to subcommittee reports. and let's see if we can, I think we're all on the same page with what we're doing here. But we are, I'm going to try to say where I think we are. Mr. Griffin, if I'm not thinking what you're thinking, then be sure to let me know that. But I think as we have all of our heads here in one room. The plan is that we, tonight, land use is going to report on, to share the memo, the partial memo with you all about RS and RM minimum lot size and density, density standards that would be associated with that. And I think then that someone from planning will be sharing about Greenfield subdivision development and all other things. And that those are the two things that we need to share tonight. With that done, we will have everything except one component completed. And that is the completion of housing's work on missing middle duplexes, triplexes, whatever. And they will be prepared to bring that to us on October the 8th. I think the plan has been that on the 8th, well, prior to the 8th, staff will have put together a kind of an executive summary related to our work issue by issue, a very short summary, not a long pages and pages and pages. And then, so then the report that will go to our mayor will be a memo from me. It will be an executive summary of the issues as we've discussed them. And then it will be an addendum, I guess, appendix, whatever we want to call it, of the documents that we have all shared with each other. Simply documents meaning the memos, like what we bring to a work session to use for vetting the issue. That will provide for the mayor and the commission some foundational kind of information for their use as they choose to use it. All right. So with that said, that's going to be on the 8th. We will, I guess, need to allow time at the beginning of that session for us to hear the report on missing middle, and then that can be added to the report. We need to discuss then, I don't have a magic answer, we need to discuss how this body will then see the final report. But you can be thinking about that. I don't want us to necessarily stop right now and spend 30 minutes trying to figure that out. But I think the commission needs to see the report in its entirety. So we'll figure out a way to do that. It may well be that, you know, there may be even things in the summary or in the report that comes back that, you know, we may have comments about. So whether there needs to be some other time, I don't know. And then I don't know, Brad, what time this needs, at what date this has to go to Mayor Gertz. So anyway, maybe I'm trying to not take a whole lot of time to do that. Let's get through with our reports. That kind of puts the process on the table, leaves you with the general question at the end to how to tie a bow around this. And that how to put a bow around this is something that we need to kind of, I guess, discuss together. So if we could, let's move to, just to give you all an opportunity, not have to hear me right here straight again. Let's ask whoever's going to do the Greenfield subdivision development height from staff to do that first. And that will give you a break from hearing Maxine's voice and me a break from talking. Is that all right, Brett?
That's fine. And I don't know if Bruce wanted to go through in detail. I mean, Bruce and I talked after agenda setting real quickly, and I think there was a little bit of confusion. Part of it was my own fault. That I think some of these memos originally were prepped to be to the committees from staff. I think this one was, in my mind, this was coming to you all tonight as a planning commission and needed to be to the planning commission from the committees through staff. And so I may have botched this one a little bit too. The issue on the greenfield development, we've talked about it a little bit. When the infill housing ordinance was adopted back in 2017, we established, basically it is a set of moving setbacks based on vertical heights and overall heights of buildings as they relate to property lines. We still think that is a very good tool to use and are not requesting that go away for any lots basically that were in place prior to December of 2000, which is the date that the initial zoning ordinance was adopted. So if you've got a lot that was in place prior to that, these infill standards would still apply. So you're still having your protection for lots in the in-town neighborhoods, in some of the older neighborhoods. If there was a lot, they would also apply for any new lots that are created that are not part of a major subdivision. So the piece that we're recommending for you to consider to remove from having to follow these floating setbacks are for lots that are within what we refer to as a major subdivision. So if developer A goes out and buys 15 acres of land and he builds a neighborhood with 32 houses in it, and they're all being built at the same time in proximity to each other, those should not have to follow those floating standards so as not to impact a neighbor that may have been there for a long, long time. They would just follow base setbacks as they appear in the ordinance today before you start moving. And that's really kind of the crux of it at this point. I think the land use committee did talk about this a little bit, and it's my understanding, although I'm not 100% sure, that maybe housing talked about it at their very first meeting for just a few minutes, but it's basically what we're trying to do is ask the question to you, or pose the question: should, for example, a new neighborhood, the one that's being built off of Macon Highway right now, that's finally getting legs again, should those houses have to adjust their setbacks from each other when they're all new construction based on their heights, like we're requiring in the in-town? Our recommendation to you would be a lot easier, and probably a lot easier on the developers in these new neighborhoods to not require those moving setbacks and simply let them follow a set of base setbacks, because it's a new development. You're moving into something that you see what's being built at the time, and so that's basically the recommendation, and would be interested, if you're comfortable with it, and just going ahead and preparing that for as a text amendment that would go up. I think there were two of them. That one to eliminate the infill housing standards in new subdivisions, and the other one I think y'all will talk about on land use is the issue of minimum lot sizes, and at what point, especially in the RM, do we start reducing bedroom density so as to discourage some tear downs? But that's for y'all at a later time. Would ideally love to have those two go up as amendments and let the commission, if they're comfortable, vote on them in November so as to put them in place immediately, because y'all still have a lot of work on the other bigger issues that you've requested through your executive summary to come back and continue working on. But that's basically what the greenfield building height and standards is all about.
Questions?
Do I understand this correctly? You're basically just resetting to the standards before the infill proposal was developed, and they're the old standards for new subdivisions.
Yes, sir. I can't tell if Jim's talking. And
Jim, are you talking, honey?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm done.
I have a Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, because I kind of remember us talking about this only because I remember thinking, what is a greenfield development? And so I remember Bruce telling us about that. But it kind of segued into our RS discussion. I, in general, don't have a problem with that. My one question, though, is if you have, say, a subdivision that is like partially built out, I'm thinking like Oak Grove, for example, where you have like an established subdivision, but then it has like these other parts of it. How would those other parts that aren't developed at the same time and maybe developed by different developers, how would those fit into that standard?
I mean, if they've not been developed at this point, but they were part of it, when you bring in a major subdivision, it's really a three-step. You do it's called a preliminary plat that shows an overall concept of the whole thing. It really doesn't give you any authority to build anything. Then you submit your engineering drawings, you build it, then you record your final plats, which are the ones that actually go to the courthouse and get recorded, and then you can build on those lots. You know, for later phases of a subdivision, if that subdivision went through the preliminary platting after December of 2000 under the new regulations, then they would not be required to do infill. But if it was an older neighborhood under different setbacks, and that's kind of the way we set up the infill now, there was a window between December of 2000 and the adoption of these standards in 17 that any of those neighborhoods like Towns Walk that was built during that time, where they were RS-25, but they were able to use very small lots, they weren't subject to these sliding setback scales because it was all built under one design concept. But for Kingswood, for example, if somebody if there's a vacant lot in Kingswood or Cedar Creek, or somebody was able to buy a lot and subdivide a new lot out of it, they are subject to those infill standards. And it's a lot harder to build a house under those standards. You got to pay a lot more attention to what you're doing to your neighbor than you do in a new neighborhood where it's generally a tract builder building everything. And we think it should stay that way.
Yeah.
As I understand it, the idea is to not require the infill standards for lots that effectively don't have any neighbors. Is that right?
Or they've got other brand new neighbors that were just built at the same time. Yes.
Well, yeah. So in that case, everybody starts on the same page, and it's not a new house coming in between two existing houses on an empty lot. I confess that I'll wait for the ordinance to see, but the idea of allowing a new neighborhood to develop as a new neighborhood, as long as it meets some overall code, that each individual lot you can put the houses where you want, because then you have to put it somewhere where you can sell it to somebody, or you as a developer are stuck with it. And they're probably smart enough to not make that mistake too many times, it seems to me. So the infill thing was very important to me, but in this case, I can see why it wouldn't apply, and I can see why it might make it more complicated to develop a street full of lots. So it may not need to apply there.
My question is, what guarantee is there I just don't know the answer to this, for design? What prohibits in a new subdivision from what has happened in the places where we do have the floating setbacks because of design? Are we assuming that in a new subdivision, every house is going to be basically similar? I mean,
the protections there are still maximum heights based on your zoning district. There are still setbacks from property lines. There are still, setbacks from the street. But for example, in the infill ordinance, if your elevation is more than 20 feet tall, you got to start moving away from that common property line with your neighbor a foot for every foot up, because that neighbor has been there for a long time, and we're trying to provide that protection. In the case of a new neighborhood being built, then it's more of a common theme. They still can't, that doesn't give them the right to go in and build 40-foot tall buildings. But if it's two new buildings next to each other that are both of equal height, or maybe not, but it is all a new product that's being sold, under a common development theme. And I guess that's where we think it is probably not as necessary. It may actually provide for some reduce construction costs. Let's put it that way, on these new neighborhoods, because they're not having to modify roofs, not having to modify footprints, things like that in order to, the builder's aggravation is that I'm being told I've got to put a hip instead of a gable roof on this side of the house so as to protect the house next door. Well, that's my house too. I'm building that one, and they're going to all end up looking the same because, I can't vary those roof elevations, because if I go over 20 feet, I've got to start moving. And so we just think that that is an opportunity to provide a little more flexibility for the builders in areas where it does not impact existing long-term residents.
Matt, then Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this seemed like an easy yes to me. I understand the reasons for it. It makes perfect sense, and I don't really see a problem with it.
Jeff?
The intention is to not impact the neighbor who's been there for a long time. And I think also it's there to protect the neighbor who's only been there a short time.
Sure enough.
So, but again, and I don't remember what it is about the infill ordinance that makes it apply to a whole neighborhood at once. And we can talk about that later, but my point is, let's make sure it still applies to existing homes, but it doesn't need to apply to homes or neighborhoods that don't exist. And I don't know how you turn that into legal language, but it seems simple to me.
We are prepared to bring you an amendment next week.
I don't either, Jeff. Bingo. I mean, that's it. I don't know enough about constraints for new construction, but I don't know what would prohibit a neighbor from coming in and building a mansion next door. What are there some design codes that prohibit that in new subdivision?
Only the building heights and the requirements of the underlying, the setbacks and standards that were in place from December of 2000 up through February of 2017, when we adopted the infill, they were standard setbacks. So you can build a house that's 30 feet tall in an RS-15 zone, and you can put it 6 feet away from your property line if you want it to be that way in a new neighborhood. And that was in all neighborhoods before. And so that's where we're running into problems with the infill, that somebody buys a lot on Millage Terrace and they tear down a house, or they're able to subdivide it, and you've got a 1-story house or a 1.5-story house, and a neighbor literally 6 feet away could go 30 feet in the air with a wall. And so the intent was that in those situations that you've got a right to go up to 20 feet, which is generally a 2-story elevation. But for every foot over that 20 for that vertical wall plane, you've got to move it away from your neighbor a foot.
I get the infill. I think I have a good grasp of that. I'm trying to understand how it is we prohibit that from happening in Greenfield.
In a new neighborhood that's being built, that a developer, and he does a 50-lot subdivision, we would not prohibit that from happening. There would not be an equivalency of the house next door that requires him to establish modified setbacks, which is the way we always did it. But when we adopted the infill standards, what we said is for all of those neighborhoods that were developed between 2000 and 2017 that utilize really small lots and a lot of open space, and now they're being told, they should be allowed to follow the rules that they platted their subdivisions under. We're just asking to continue that for new neighborhoods. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but there's not.
I'm obviously not asking the question appropriately. I'm gonna try one more time, then I'll stop and I'll ask later. For the new subdivisions that have not yet been built out, that have not yet been built, that we are, what we're talking about right here. For those subdivisions, what guarantees that in the building of those, if they buy a house, that's something different. But if they buy a lot and they build their own house, what prohibits them from doing to that space what has been done to the space that we use in the infill codes, whatever word that is, to prohibit? So I still didn't say it clearly enough.
No, I think the answer on this is just going to be the maximum building heights that are established by zone anyway in the ordinance for a new neighborhood. So they could build a 30-foot tall wall in a new neighborhood. Yeah, and that's assuming, and it does happen that that you have a developer that comes in and he builds. He sells the lots, and then individuals are able to build their own homes for their own contractors, which we don't see a whole lot anymore, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. But really beyond that, under this, which is pretty standard everywhere else, covenants would be the only other thing of a neighborhood other than the base setbacks and heights established by the zoning district.
But this is in the case that all the houses are being developed at once. So yes, you can build a 30-foot house, but there's no neighbor to impact because the same guy is building the same house 6 feet away or 12 feet away, I guess. Is that right?
That's right. And the other thing that really changed in 2000.
Unless the lots are sold individually. The lots are sold individually and then people build their own house.
Right.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I have a practical example. We live in a subdivision that was still being built out when we bought our property. Our next door neighbor at the time had a 400 square foot log cabin, and we built a 2,500 square foot house on the lot adjacent to it. Fortunately, the lots are very big, and so they're nowhere near each other, so it's not a problem. But that's, I think, what Maxine is trying to get at. If they were on relatively smaller lots, that could create some conflict.
You went off, Jim, but that was helpful. That helped me. Okay, any other questions or comments? Then we assume that you will be bringing back a text amendment in that packet. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And we're going to move on, put it over here, move on to land uses memo. You have to have a stupendous grasp of something to just summarize it. And so I have just learned so much. You have no idea how much I've learned. I don't know, but I have a stupendous grasp of something. So I'm going to do my best to summarize so we can keep this short, but I'm going to give you some information.
Maxine, I got like a text message email that I thought might have been from you. Did you want me to summarize it or are you cool with it?
That would be good. I didn't hear back from you, and so I didn't know what to go on, girl.
Okay, yeah, it was weird. It's like an email from a phone number, so I wasn't sure what that was, but I figured it was you. So, yeah, so I was trying to do a little bit of studying anyway to try to present it to you all. So, so yeah, and is it better to share my screen and we kind of look at it together, or does everybody have it up on their computers? I'm cool with whatever.
Either way works fine.
I can share it if you like.
If you want, that's fine. I mean, I have it up. I'm just going to read off of what I have up, but that's fine. Whatever works.
I have it ready. If you want me to share it, I have it ready. So.
Yeah, go ahead. I think just if anybody wants to watch the video later on, it might be nice to have it up too. So,
okay.
Fine.
Make sure I get the right one.
I think that's a great idea to put it up, Kristen.
Oh, that's the other one. Sorry.
The other one.
Wrong one.
Okay. All right, so we looked at minimum lot sizes, originally started in the RS zone, but then included RM, and I'll get into that later on as we go through. But basically the question was, how do minimum lot sizes and the density standards affect affordability for housing? So, so going down to the background section, Rick. So it's a little bit of just kind of just setting the stage here. We're looking at code that was adopted 20 years ago. And so looking at RS specifically, there are these three main goals that go along with the density standards. And how the density calculation fits into that. We're looking mainly at smaller, so lots of 2 acres. Wait, let's see. Density calculation associated with design of residential subdivisions of 2 acres or greater in the RS zones. Yeah, so basically we're looking at what we can put on our RS lots, right? And just a lot of this. Okay, so the background is the background. We're just kind of learning about kind of what creates all of these to begin with. I'm going to go down to findings though. So here's our basic points that we came up with. There can be a link between minimum lot size and the development density regulations to provide affordable housing. But again, we're really kind of at the mercy of the developer to pass those cost savings on to whoever buys the house. So similar to kind of the other stuff we've been finding. So the regulations that we have, it's like we haven't gotten a lot of really negative feedback from developers about what we have in place. But we just, well, I mean, anybody else feel free to jump in because I feel like I read this and now I'm like kind of blanking on our discussion. But we're, what I really was wanted to get into with like incorporating the RM zones into this discussion, because it was hard for us to talk about RS and not acknowledge some of the RM neighborhoods too, because basically there's single family housing there as well. And so it seemed like we were only talking about part of the problem of affordable housing if we're only talking about the single family residential zones. So, because in general, we didn't have a lot of things to change about the RS zone minimum lot sizes and the density calculations, because there hadn't been a lot of issues coming from the development side. We haven't seen a lot of issues coming up. But what we did find was in the RM zone, like we wanted to incorporate that into the discussion. Because we felt like there were some opportunities for affordable housing through existing housing stock that might be lost under the current bedroom density. Because what happens in RM neighborhoods is that by right, you can build a 3-bedroom structure, or you can have 3 bedrooms on your lot, no matter the size. Whereas in RS, there are some size limitations to that. So, so we were concerned that there would be.
Kristen.
Yeah.
Really, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. If it predates December the 7th of 2010, it has to predate that date in 2010 to get the 3 bedroom.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right. You're right. Yes. Yeah. So basically anything yeah, so anything over 10 years ago is going to be, can be replaced by a 3-bedroom unit. So a lot of our discussion really was focused on how to incorporate RMs into this. And in RMs too, we have these lots that are small that you don't typically see in the RS zones. And our concern was that you would have something that was maybe a smaller structure, a 1 or a 2-bedroom house that might be older, that was getting replaced by a 3-bedroom house. And the question is that really creating affordability? And I also want to note this last paragraph too, because I know we had talked earlier about accessory dwelling units, and there was some discussion about RMs, and we don't want to negate what was done there because we're still in line with what was being discussed then. But then we realized, well, if we are able to tweak the RM requirements about the lot sizes, that might allow for some space to create accessory dwelling units in RMs. And by that, I mean that so our proposal is that lots that are less than 5,000 square feet would be allowed a maximum of 2-bedroom units. And then there could also be some argument being made that by encouraging accessory dwelling units on lots of, that might be, either 5,000 less or even greater, by encouraging that in the RM zones, you could actually maybe create some affordable housing, again, keeping the existing housing stock. So instead of tearing down an older house and building a 3-bedroom house, maybe you're adding the bedroom in the back and you're using the length of that lot in a different way. So basically it was one of those like, well, with this tweak, maybe this opens up a door in the ADU discussion too. So I feel like I really muddled through that, but maybe that was hitting the high points.
You did great. There's only one additional thing I would call to everyone's attention, and it's what we call giving something to get something. In other words, rather than just, I'm not talking about RM now, I'm talking more about RS, but instead of just giving things, we might do it as a bonus. We give bonuses now. We have density bonuses that people can get, bonuses related to density. So our recommendation in this has to do with allowing bonuses, affordable housing unit bonuses. And so I think when Kristen gives the recommendations, she'll say that, but that was one of our major findings, was that it might not be wise to just outright give it, because then they have no requirement to do it. But if we can work it as a bonus, if you do this, then you get this. And they could keep the density bonuses, but then this would be affordable housing bonus kind of condition. And so that was one of the things that we predicated the recommendations on.
Right.
So it might be good to read those 3 recommendations, Kristen.
Yeah. So.
Do you want me to put those back up? Sorry.
So we find, once he gets it up, we can all read it too, but, oops, I just jumped down. So we found that the RS zone minimum lot sizes and density calculations are appropriate to support the standard market rate single family development. But we thought that additional density could be provided through density bonus incentives that are related to affordable housing. So we added some code sections and further down the document, they're highlighted, that could show how our code could be amended to accommodate this type of bonus. And it would also, we kind of left a little blank spot in it because we also know that there's some talk about creating some sort of affordable housing program. And so this would work in conjunction with that because it would need some sort of mechanism to just enforce it. And so that's kind of like the one thing we've kind of left in that to account for that once that's figured out. The second recommendation is that the current RM provision in the footnote 1, so that's like further down, following this table 983, allows more bedroom density than should be possible to ensure compatibility with existing development conditions in established residential areas with single family uses that are zoned RM. Revisions to this code section are proposed that would no longer allow 3-bedroom units by right on existing lots with less calculated density. Instead, lots of record that meet the minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet would be eligible to contain a maximum of 3 bedrooms, and lots less than 5,000 square feet be allowed to a maximum of 2 bedrooms. So this is what I was referring to earlier about the lot sizes. And then we also recommended that the ADU development standards associated with the RM zone be revisited. And again, this idea that if we are talking about bringing in more bedrooms, it could be done through ADUs. So it does open that possibility there, even though I know the other committee did discuss that and was just going to do it in RS. But anyway, open that for discussion.
Go to the back page, Rick, on page 11.
Yeah, I'm just going to scroll down. Yeah, so that 974 density. So we already have a density bonus for larger subdivisions, but then this would be kind of adding a section that.
Whoa.
There you go. Yeah, so this would be adding a section with the idea that so basically you can get more houses on your subdivision if you commit to an affordable housing program. And then with that, a certain percentage of those houses would be deemed as affordable. And we came up with 50% after some discussion. Some of it just being if you had 3 houses, how would you, if you wanted to make it 75%, you couldn't really make that, or even 3 houses, how do you make it 50%? So there's still maybe some finagling that needs to be done with that. But that's the idea, is that it builds in a mechanism to have that affordable housing incorporated into a development, and everybody kind of gets something out of it.
One of the things in the beginning, we said that all of the units you earn through this affordable housing density bonus would have to go to affordable housing. And then we kind of backed off of that and said, well, maybe, as this says, 75% of the units gained would be developed as affordable housing. That all of that certainly would be up for discussion. We're not necessarily wed or bound to that at all. But you have to do something in order to earn it. And when you earn it, then you have to use it for that. Or at 75% of it, or whatever percentage we set as a group. So thank you, Kristen. That was great. Questions?
I think Jim's got his hand up, Maxine.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I have a concern about restricting the ability to have 3 bedrooms in a 5,000 square foot lot, because I grew up, as I've told you many times, on a small house about 670 square feet. And most of the houses in my neighborhood were similar in cross section, but at least several of my neighbors had at least 1,000 square feet. Some of them did it by creating attic space and converting it into bedrooms. At least one of my neighbors did it by making an addition on the back of the house to make more bedroom. I don't see any problem with allowing 3 bedrooms. You're going to essentially prevent some people that don't have ambitions to tear up the neighborhood from improving their house.
I think the issue that we were addressing with that, Jim, was the problem. The trend really isn't that people are building into their attics and things like that. These houses are just disappearing, and they're getting replaced by new infill that then becomes a rental and is not owner occupied. So I completely see what you're saying. It's just, unfortunately, that's just not the trend that we're seeing, especially in these the RM neighborhoods.
I think one of the things the committee was working on too, in part of their thoughts were that for the RM zones, and we've talked about this before this was established, where for new lots in RM zones, if you create a new lot, you've got to use the same bedroom density that a multifamily apartment does, because people were carving them up and ended up with a lot more beds, and it was all investment. The reason for the 5,000 square foot was that is still considered under today's ordinance a legal lot of record meeting minimum size. And so if you've got a legal lot that was created before that date that still meets our minimum size today, you should get at least a 3-bedroom house. But if you've got a little strip of property there that is 2,200 square feet, it's been in place for a long, long time, and you want to build something on it, you get less than that. And the reason largely was to keep, the small lot, older house, maybe a 2-bedroom from being torn down to get a 3. Realistically, in an RM1 zone right now, in order to build a 3-bedroom house on a new lot, you've got to have about 9,000 square feet to do it, based on the 16 beds per acre. But that was why we did everybody should have the right to at least build a new 3-bedroom house if they had a lot that existed prior to this amendment. And we're still keeping that for lots that are legal, but if they are non-conforming legal, undersized, then you only get 2 if you build new.
One of the real, Matt, go ahead. You're muted, Matt. You're muted.
So I just have a question about Jim's question and Kristen's answer to clarify my understanding of the committee's proposal on this. If somebody has a non-conforming lot that currently has a 3-bedroom house on it, they'd be grandfathered in under this proposal, right? All you're talking about, if either an unbuilt lot that's not 5,000 square feet, that would lose its 3-bedroom entitlement and only have a 2-bedroom entitlement, and also a built lot with a 1 or 2-bedroom house on it would only have a 2-bedroom entitlement if it's under 5,000 square feet. Is that
I'm
correct?
not sure about the last thing you said. Say what you said last again.
So the second part was just a lot that already has a house on it that is not 3 bedrooms, that is 1 or 2 bedrooms or 0 bedrooms, whatever, something that doesn't have 3 bedrooms, would be able to build, renovate or tear down and build a 2-bedroom house. They just wouldn't have the 3-bedroom entitlement. The only people with a non-conforming lot who would be entitled to 3 bedrooms in an RM1 zone would be people who currently have a 3-bedroom house on that lot. Is that a correct understanding?
And that would only, yes, and that would only be through renovation. If you did a complete demolition, you could only build back 2.
Okay.
What's happening now, I hate to keep using it, but think of what's happened on Cars Hill. Those were single-family houses in an RM zone after the 70s. And so what's happening is developers are just tearing them down and building max, So there's a way to preserve single family and still get the same number of bedrooms as they would get if they built these monstrosities that they're building. You can use accessory dwelling units. So there are ways to make that happen. We didn't know of your discussion about RM, and we certainly didn't have time to explore in depth RM related to this. So we needed to count on your, meaning housing folks, expertise as it relates to RM and how you see this whole RM accessory dwelling, why you stopped, why you did, you know, give us a little feedback on that would help us.
Yeah, I can say a little about that, and I'm sure the other members of the Housing Committee will have something to add. So the idea of the decision to exclude from our recommendation to permit ADUs RM zoned parcels was driven by concerns about not incentivizing gentrification. Basically, the exact problem you're talking about, where there's an existing lot in RM1 that's kind of naturally affordable housing. It has a rather small house on it. If you, anything that allows an investor to buy an RM1 single family home and then increase the number of bedrooms drives up the value of that parcel tremendously, because then they can house students there. You know, if they have a 3-bedroom house and they can do a 2-bedroom ADU, suddenly they've got 5 bedrooms of student rental, and they rented it $750 a bedroom, and you know it dwarfs the value of the lot in its single family use. And so we were concerned that because of the single family definition in the Athens ordinances makes that less of a concern in RS5 and RS8, because you can't have more than 2 unrelated people in a single unit. But the fact that in RM1 they can put as many unrelated people as they want in there, we just thought, allowing 800 square foot ADUs on RM1 parcels, at least non-owner occupied RM1 parcels, let's say, would drive up the value of those parcels and thus make them subject to quicker gentrification. It would accelerate the patterns that we're already seeing. And so that was the reason that we decided to not recommend it at this stage, but just flag these issues in our memo so that the mayor and commission, as they consider the ADU thing, they may decide, we want to go ahead and do it in RM1, but we wanted to just flag it. And we figured it was really something for them to weigh and consider. Maybe some of the other committee members have more to say on that.
Alice has her hand up.
Thank you. Matt did a really good job summarizing that. I'll just add, because Carl's Hill is such a great example. For my own part, and I expressed this to the committee, and they seem to hear and agree. Basically, Matt outlined the problem with why we did not include RM zones in our discussion about ADUs, but sort of underlying that, we really felt that these very neighborhoods that we were talking about, Kristen knows all about them. She's done a lot of work in this area, but they shouldn't be RM1. They were rezoned to RM1, and Carl's Hill is a great example. That was a mistake, and so I think I was hoping sort of that this would be an opportunity for the mayor and commission to go back and look at some of those RM1 zones that are being used as single family and rethink some of that. But that might be a pipe dream. But that was my thinking.
Don't I wish?
I would fully support that. Fully support that.
You have no idea how many times in the last 10 years since I've been on the commission, I've come really fully aware. I want to say, where were you in 1980? Where were you when you let this happen? But I don't know how you turn back time. I don't know how they could even change the zoning, make that happen. I don't know. Okay, anybody on land use? Anybody else want to say anything about that? Catherine, Katie? I don't know why I look at your name and say Catherine. I know Katie. Katie, I think our wording in here was what the problem was. We had a land use discussion this afternoon, late afternoon, 4 o'clock, that had to do with this, I think it was the wording in it rather than, but we also didn't have enough in there about the accessory dwelling unit whole idea that we were trying to see if we wanted to promote. So, Katie, have we explored that enough to, do you think, or say some more if you want to say some more?
Yeah, I think it's great to hear the explanation. I think the housing committee kind of is, yeah, I think it's actually in their memo, the idea that one of the reasons to promote accessory dwelling units is to allow it to be rented out by the owner of a property, so that they can actually benefit from the value of their property going up and not have to move out. What else? I think you covered.
The whole idea of owner occupied, which is in your report, what we talked about, really throws another glitch into these older neighborhoods. We talked about the fact that they're narrow and deep, and they lend themselves to the building of a second kind of thing. But what happens is that developers go in, split the property, make themselves 2 lots, and then build whatever they want to on both of them. And so how do we keep that from happening, and still give people the bedrooms that are helpful to them? And I'm not saying eliminate developers from that. Can't eliminate developers from it. What we can do is try to contain what's happening in some way. So I'm just not totally sure how to do that, but maybe the answer is really where you all decided that we still need to leave it as a to be continued idea, continuing to consider that. But to be sure that when we identify in our report, things that are related to affordable housing, things that have nothing to do with affordable housing, but we went on and researched them anyway. And then a last category of things we have yet that we're very interested in thinking about. List that as one of the things. And I think it's basically in your report too, housing's report too. So, okay, so Matt.
I just wanted to add one more wrinkle that occurred to me, which is that if ADUs were allowed in RM1, unless we said otherwise in an ordinance amendment, those bedrooms would count for the density, right? So somebody with a 2-bedroom house that was all the bedrooms they were allowed to have wouldn't be able to do an ADU because that would bring them up to 3 or 4 bedrooms. So unless we exempted ADUs, which I don't think anyone had proposed, it may be kind of a moot point because you're only going to be able to do an ADU on an RM1 parcel that already has allowable unbuilt bedrooms, that already is a large enough piece of land that you'd be able to do 4 or 5 bedrooms, which I think would be like 1/3 of an acre or 1/4 of an acre. You don't see a lot of RM1 parcels of that size. So it may be, unless we were.
I think I own one. I think I do own one. Mm-hmm.
But that was a lot of the give and take that made the West Hancock neighborhood so interesting and complicated, because, and I think this amendment that the land use committee is proposing on the 2-bedroom limit for these non-conforming lots provides another level of protection. That was always the concern. If you go into an area like West Hancock, zone multifamily, it right now is carrying on most of those lots a 3-bedroom cap on new construction, which really reduces the gentrification component. West Hancock's in Chase Street. To go in and buy one of those lots, tear down the little house with 3 bedrooms and build a 4 or 5, they can't do that even now, and they really won't be able to do it with this amendment. If that were to be rezoned to single family, and people look at it and say, well, single family would provide some protection. Well, it immediately eliminates the bedroom cap. And so all of a sudden, for a different reason than possibly the investor doing the student rental, it's still a gentrification issue if it's in a desirable location for a tear down in a new big house and something that completely, one, doesn't fit, and two, starts really pushing up values and associated taxes. So it's always complicated.
It really is. I think that's maybe one of the more complicated positive thinking, but complicated discussions we've had.
So
Okay.
are you guys comfortable with us preparing the text amendment for this RM2 2-bedroom lot change too, and send both that one and the infill up for potential quicker action?
You're meaning put it in a report? Is that what you're saying?
It would be in the report, but we could actually pull that one little piece out and send it as a text amendment, like we're sending the elimination of the infill standards for new major subdivisions. And that could get it adopted as soon as November potentially, instead of going into next year before we actually get an amendment to change it. Those would be the only two that I would recommend. I think the rest of them are more policy that we need more direction from the commission, but I think we could send those two if y'all are comfortable with it.
Can I clarify your question, Brad? Because I think it's a great idea if I understand. You're talking about the land use committee's proposal about eliminating the 3-bedroom entitlement for substandard lots in RM zones.
And that's all.
Yes. Yeah, that seems like a great idea to me.
So that was just restricted to RM, not to RS?
Correct.
That's
I don't
right.
have a problem if it's not in the RS zone.
That's correct, Jim. RM. And then, am I getting a yes for them to bring back a text amendment?
Yes.
Okay, I'm assuming everybody's pretty well on that. The other idea that I want to be sure that we feel comfortable with is with this idea of writing the code so that there could be affordable housing bonus in some way. Do you think you understand this enough to even talk about that? Or do you have, I mean, we've probably explained it as good as we can. Brad could probably help us some, but to put into the report to the mayor that we would really like to consider a bonus for affordable housing, some kind of density bonus for affordable housing. Yes, Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to say the housing committee talked about this a little bit in the context of the inclusionary zoning memo, as you guys remember. And I think what you just described seems like where we were at also. We thought it was a fine idea, but that would need to be crafted separately from the density bonuses and other bonuses and incentives that you might offer to people like, who are building 6-story student housing rentals and stuff like that. That subdivision of 5 or 10, whatever, 2 acres, that an incentive program would look very different there, but that it seemed like a fine idea. And so I think we even have some language in the inclusionary zoning memo saying, we think this is a good idea, that if the mayor and commission are on board with it, that we should, they should assign us some more homework and we'll work on it. And so, I think both committees have independently arrived at similar conclusion on the idea that seems like a nifty thing to pursue.
Then it gives you a guarantee that you're going to, if you give people something, you're going to get something from it. You're going to get affordable housing from it. And I think that's what we're trying to go after. So for me, I really think it's a good plan. I mean, doing that is something we should pursue further, I guess, once we get permission from the mayor to do that. Jim?
Yeah, one of our major concerns in being somewhat less specific about it is that we have to choose incentives that will actually be economically viable for builders to use. And we don't know exactly what those are. We need a lot more information from the building community to help us figure out what would be reasonable. Because if it's too small, it won't give anybody an incentive. And if it's too big, we'll just give away the store.
Yes.
I agree. I mean, let the inclusionary do the heavy lifting for getting these density bonuses, but what the number is, we need to do more work. You know, the proposal that's in the memo, you know, if we give you a 50% bonus, but 75% of the bonus has to be affordable, you know, we just got to look at that, because what that's saying is I can build 100 by right, 100 houses at full price, or I can build an extra 50, but 37 of them have to be affordable. So I'm getting 12 more full market units for 37 affordable. I'm probably not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what the number is either. That's just, we need to do more work.
That's what we kept saying. What is the magic number for that? And so we don't know either. But the concept in and of itself, I think, is good.
Yes.
And I want to say Bruce found that like there's 2 other cities in Georgia that have a similar setup, and theirs is set at 50%, I think. So there is but I'd be curious to know how they even came to that. So.
And then there is some overlap with bonuses, because if you have a density bonus, then you have an open space bonus. You know, you can't put them together and get more than you got. You know, you gotta say then a maximum bonus with everything you're putting together is this. We don't know what that is either. So, you know, all of that, those kinds of things have to go together. As far as we understand, land use folks, they're really, right now, it's only that one open space, the bonus with open space. And then this would be the other bonus. Is that, are those the only 2? I mean, if we decide to do this, but right now, currently, is there, do you just get bonus now for the open space?
Open space and active recreation, I think, are the 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? Oh, I know about active recreation. So I didn't even know about that. Okay, we didn't talk about that. All right, then I think we've got that to the point that they can do something with it and bring it back to us. Okay.
I just wanted to raise one other thing that's kind of relevant to this. I think there's a bit of there's a gap. You know, when you get to somebody's dividing up an acre and they're doing 6 lots, and you give them a bonus of 50% if they make some, you know, the numbers start to work out. But there's kind of a gap where you have in Boulevard, in Cobham, in 5 Points, there's quite a few lots that are, you know, pretty close to double the required lot size. Like it's RS8, but somebody has a 15,000 square foot lot. So they can't divide it, but they're very close to being able to divide it. And I think it's the incentive program we're talking about is not any kind of solution, because what incentive is there? You know, they can't do a lot, and we allow them to do 1 lot. We can't say you can do 1 lot if it's all affordable, you know, because then there's very little incentive for them to do it. And so we had talked a little bit on the housing committee about the idea, and we never came to a final conclusion on it, but the idea of maybe saying that for existing lots that are more than, you know, 150% of the required minimum lot size, that they could be subdivided, or more than 180% of the minimum lot size, that they could be subdivided. So you don't get a ton of lots, but it would facilitate generation of some more buildable land in the central area of the city, where, as I'm sure all of you know, I have some friends who were looking for a lot to build on in Boulevard for like 2 years, and they ended up almost going forward on a lot that was available on Satula that was like $200,000, and they, you know, it was insanely priced, but there are only a few of those. You know, you want a lot in Boulevard, you're going to pay whatever the 2 people who have one for sale demand for it. And the same is true in much of 5 Points and certainly in Cobham. And so I just wanted to make a pitch, just sort of like, you know, where we ended up on the housing committee was that maybe this was a good idea, but we just didn't have enough time to pursue it. And but the idea, and so maybe we come back to it when we're talking about incentives in January or something. But making more lots available, I think, necessarily drives down the prices of the few lots that are available, right? It makes it possible for people to buy lots in Boulevard for less than what the one person who's selling a lot demands, less than $200,000 or $300,000 or whatever. And so there are some people, you guys talked in your memo about it's up to the developer whether they pass the savings on. But there are some people who are actually just looking for a lot to buy and build for themselves on, and it brings down the cost of the land. And so it makes that house considerably more affordable. It enables them to do it, you know, at a lower price point, which obviously does not qualify as affordable housing by any sort of recognized definition, but it makes it more affordable. It makes it cheaper. It doesn't mean somebody at 80% of AMI is going to be able to build a house in Boulevard, but it does create more housing, right? It creates more supply, and it uses existing infrastructure, and it's environmentally friendly because you have more lots that are close in that people can walk to work and so on. And so personally, I think it's a great idea. I think there was some support for it on the housing committee, and I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And maybe the answer is just, we'll talk about it in January, but I thought you guys might have talked about it. So I wanted to flag that. Okay.
But one thing that we really did talk about that I think we've mentioned tonight that I want us to be sure that we stick a pin in too, is this whole idea that some of our older housing can and should be a part of our affordable housing force, you know, housing. So we just must protect some of the housing that exists that in and of itself is more likely to be affordable housing than other housing. Anyway, I just had to throw that out. All right, I guess that's everything, Brad. I hope you have good memory.
I used to.
You can remember everything we said tonight. We were powerful. What can we say? All right. So our meeting is on the 8th. Everybody should get something prior to that. When do you all meet again, Matt?
Muted.
You're muted.
We're not meeting again physically before the 8th. We're going to talk over the weekend, probably by email, about the memo and get that finalized so that we can get it out to y'all early in the week, and give you guys plenty of time to read it and think about it before we get together on the 8th.
Okay. What time, Brad, is our meeting on the 8th?
I thought we said 5:30.
Yeah.
Was it 5:30?
5:30, and I guess the other thing we need to just make sure we're all on the same page, because what you will ultimately be voting on then, hopefully on Thursday, with a formal vote. Actually, there'd be probably 3 formal votes. There'll be the 2 text amendments that will be going forward, and they'll look just like text amendments you normally send forward, that are products of the big packet with your memo on it and the executive summary and then all of the work that's behind it. We've got to make sure we are able to get Matt's committees, the housing committee's information plugged into the executive summary and that packet of information before it all goes forward. So, you know, obviously we're not going to send out a normal packet like we would generally tomorrow, because there's going to be a piece missing. But I would think you all would certainly want it by no later than Tuesday evening, to give you a little bit of time to look through the whole thing and its contents. So I'll just have Mark get with you, Matt, in terms of when we can get that so we can get it all plugged in. That's going to be the challenge, because we need to come to a meeting on Thursday of next week with a vote, because it all goes to the mayor and commission the first part of the following week. That's when they've got to have it.
Yeah, Mark and I can talk about, I can send him the draft memo when it's not yet final, when the rest of the committee is talking about it, so he can start doing the executive summary in the format that you guys are doing, and we'll work together on that.
Right.
Brad, so are you saying we should expect to get something fairly substantial to read on Tuesday?
That's what it's starting to, yes, that's what it's sounding like.
Okay.
But it'll all be stuff you've already seen. It'll just, what you will not have seen yet is the executive summary and the memo from the chair that packages up all the work you guys have done for the last 18 months.
I've already done my memo. It has to have some adjustments, but really all it does is tell the mayor how we worked, and then how the report is put together. That's all it does, but it does do that, and I think that's important. The executive summary staff will put together for us. So, and then the rest of it will be what we've got.
Brad, do you want to know one other item about the?
Answer your question. Sarah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rick, go ahead, hon. I'm sorry.
Well, we also had another text amendment just to present to you for discussion only that night. We've got some from the Community Tree Council. We've got some clarifying tree ordinance amendments. There's quite a number of them, but they're pretty minor. Just to hand out. So.
Rick, I'll have to say, I don't think on the 8th we can do anything but deal with the report. I don't think unless the world's going to come to the end with trees, we just got to hold that till our next meeting. Is there some reason we can't?
Well, they've been holding for a few months now because we've been waiting on a lighter agenda, but we haven't really had a light agenda. So
we can hold it. It's okay.
Okay.
We'll hold it.
I just think we got to focus on this and get it.
And we weren't asking you to do anything other than receive it and your free time to read it. Or we'd explain kind of where it was coming from and give you a chance to take it with you, and then we'll talk about it the following month. That was really just an opportunity to get it in your hands.
That's not a problem at all. I just think that we'll have time to.
No. We're not going to vote on anything at all.
Okay. I guess that's it, group. Fare thee well. Good night. What time is it? 9:30. That's better than I thought. All right.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
5:30 on the 8th.
5:30.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.